The thing in cell 9 hit the inner wall hard enough to make the deck plates ring, and every Drayani on the containment tier flinched at once. Warden Osk Velen did not flinch. He had trained himself out of it years ago, the way a hunter trains himself out of blinking at thunder. But he felt the impact come up through the soles of his boots and into the old break in his left shin, and he understood. In that low animal part of himself, the Drayani pretended they had outgrown exactly what the flinch meant. It meant every plated body in the room had just been told, by something older than language, that a predator was testing its cage. "Again," said Curator Surd, not looking up from her slate. "That is the 4th strike in an hour. It is learning the resonance frequency of the seam welds." "It cannot learn that," Osk said. "It is learning it," she said. On the other side of 40 centimeters of layered ablative plate and a viewing pane rated to stop a fleet slug, the specimen paced. Osk watched it through the pane the way you watch whether you cannot stop. It moved wrong. That was the only honest word any of them had ever put to it in 8 days of trying. It moved wrong. Its hide was the deep oil black of a thing that had never needed daylight, and when the cell's cold lamps caught it, the black broke into slow bands of bruised blue and green that slid across its flanks and were gone. It carried too many joints in its forelimbs. When it turned, the turn happened in the wrong order, hindquarters first, as though the animal had decided on the destination before it told its own spine. It was the size of a Drayani hunting hound. A cub, the intake report said. That was the part that had stopped being funny on the 2nd day. "Whatever grows out of that," Osk said, "is not going to fit in this room." Surd finally looked up. Her species called themselves Vanti. She was small beside him, gray and neat and unarmored, and she had cataloged 900 living things on this station without once being wrong about what they were. "I cannot classify it," she said. It came out of her like a confession. "Warden, in 30 years I have never written unknown on a manifest and meant it. I have written it now 4 times and struck it out 3. The specimen stopped pacing. It put itself square to the viewing pane and it looked at them. Not at the pane, not at the room. At them first at Surd, a flat, unhurried study, and then the gold of its eyes tracked over and settled on Osk and held. Osk had faced war beasts on 3 worlds. He had walked a Drayani war alpha down a boarding ramp with nothing but his voice and a shock goad. He knew what it was to be measured by something that eats. This was that, and it was also worse than that, because the thing behind the pane was not deciding whether it could kill him. It had decided that long ago and lost interest. It was deciding whether he was worth the walk. "Log it," Osk said, and his voice came out even, which he was proud of. "Specimen remains unresponsive to handler protocols. Specimen remains." The alert chimed. Priority 1 station command rooted straight to his cuff. Osk read it twice. "Well," he said, "that solves your manifest problem, Curator." Surd came to his shoulder and read it upside down, which she could do, and went still. The order was 3 lines. A Fleet Weapons Division cutter, the Sundering Oath, had cleared the outer buoys and requested berth. Aboard her, an overseer of the 4th Circle, Dragon Salkesh, carrying a writ of appropriation for 1 uncatalogued xenofauna specimen, Cordon 9, Cell 9. Purpose of appropriation: weapons potential assessment, and should assessment prove negative, humane termination. "They want to shoot it and see what falls out," Surd said quietly. "They want to know if it can be aimed," Osk said. He looked back at the pane. The specimen had lain down. Not curled, lain flat, chin on the deck, eyes still open, still on him, in the posture of a thing that has all the time in the world and knows it. 4th Circle, Salkesh. I served under his cousin at the Sarek blockade. The family does not lose. They arrange for the thing they were fighting to have already lost before they arrived. Can he take it, legally? He can take anything that cannot be classified, Osk said. Uncatalogued fauna has no protections. That is the whole of the law. He turned from the pane. Get me a species by the time that cutter berths, Curator, and it becomes a protected transfer and out of his reach. Fail, and it belongs to a man who intends to find out what it is by taking it apart. Serd looked at the slate in her hands as though it had betrayed her. I have had 8 days and everything this station owns, she said. The cutter berths in 6 hours. Then don't sleep, Osk said, and left the tier, and did not look back at the gold eyes, because if he looked back he would have to admit that some part of him did not want the man from the sundering oath to have it either. The corridor outside the high containment tier ran cold and blue, the cordon's night cycle lighting, and Osk walked it fast. Cordon 9 was a quarantine and holding station bolted to the lip of settled space, the place living cargo came when nobody could agree what it was or whether it should be let loose among worlds. 300 cells, a menagerie of the galaxy's mistakes and predators and unlucky imports, kept behind plate until someone decided their fate. Osk had run its security tier for 9 years and had come to think of himself as a warden in the old sense, a keeper of dangerous things, and he had been proud of that until 8 days ago, when the intake shuttle had opened its hold and Handler Bruck had put his hand toward a cage he had been told not to open. They had reattached most of Bruck's arm. The specimen had not been trying to kill him, the medical staff insisted. If it had been trying, there would have been nothing to reattach. It had simply removed the reaching hand from the equation and then sat down, unbothered, and waited to be put behind plate. That was the detail that had crawled into Osk's sleep, not the violence, the economy of it. He rounded the junction toward the security muster and nearly walked into a cadet. She stepped back and came to a clean, unhurried attention, and for a moment Osk could not place her, because the human liaison detachment was 6 faces he had not troubled to learn. Young. Small by his standard, most of them were. A plain, open face, dark eyes, hair scraped back under the soft cap of the junior grade. The name tab on her chest read HALLORAN, and under it the pale blue tab of the security cadre, provisional. She was carrying a ration flask and a hand lamp, and the flat patience of someone 3 hours into a boring watch. "Warden," she said. "Cadet." He should have gone past her. Something in the set of her, the utter absence of alarm on a tier where every Drayani he passed wore fear like a second uniform, made him stop. "You are far up the tiers for a provisional." "Perimeter sweep, sir. High containment outer ring night cycle, it's on the rotation. A beat. Sergeant Osler signs it." "It is a boring rotation." "Yes, sir." She almost smiled and did not, which he respected. "Mostly it's checking that the doors that are closed are still closed." "Then check them," Osk said, and went past her, and had put 6 strides between them before the thing that had snagged in him came loose and turned him halfway around. She was already walking, unhurried, up the outer ring toward the high tier he had just left, toward cell 9. "Cadet Halloran." She stopped, turned. "The end cell on that ring. 9. You do not stop at it, you do not approach the pane, you do not speak to what is inside it. Are we clear?" Something crossed her face. It was small and it was gone fast, and Osk, who had spent his life reading the faces of frightened creatures, could not have said what it was. Not fear, not quite obedience. "Clear, sir," she said. He watched her go up the ring. He should have escorted her past it. He told himself later in the wreckage of everything that if he had walked her past that cell himself, nothing would have changed, because it had already changed, weeks ago in the dark, without a single Drayani present to see it. But at the time he only watched her small blue-tabbed figure move up the cold corridor, and he told himself she was nobody, and he went awake his curator's rivals and his own tired mind to the problem of a man who could not lose. 6 hours was not enough, and Osk had known it was not enough. The sundering oath came in ahead of schedule. That was the first move, and Osk recognized it, because it was the move his own teachers had drilled into him. Arrive before you are ready to be received, and make the receiving hasty, and let the other party spend their composure on the scramble. By the time the cutter's umbilical kissed the cordon's high dock, Osk had a curator running on stimulants and no classification, a station commander who had already decided not to spend political capital on an unclassifiable animal, and a security tier stretched thin across a night rotation. He met the overseer at the dock because someone of rank had to, and because he wanted to see the man before the man wanted to be seen. Dragon Salkesh came off the umbilical the way weather comes off a mountain. He was fourth circle and he wore it, the deep-plated formal harness, the quill crest bleached and lacquered to the white that only the high circles were permitted, the unhurried certainty of a Drayani who had never in his life entered a room he did not expect to own. Two of his own division came behind him, hard-faced, carrying the long sedation lances of a capture team, and behind them a grav sled bearing a transport pod that Osk did not like the shape of. It was not a habitat. It was a box with restraint points, built to move something that would rather not be moved. "Warden of the second circle," Salkesh said, reading Osk's harness, and the faint pause before second was a whole sentence. "You keep a tidy dock. I had expected worse of a holding station." "Overseer, Cordon 9 received your writ 6 hours ago. That is not enough time to prepare a live transfer of a specimen of unknown." "Then it is fortunate," Salkesh said, moving past him without slowing so that Osk had to turn and match his stride or be left addressing the man's crest, "that I did not ask you to prepare one. I will assess the specimen. If it is a weapon, I will take it. If it is a beast, I will spare your commander the cost of feeding a thing he cannot name. Either way, Warden, by the time the oath undocks, Cell 9 will be empty." He glanced sideways and there was almost warmth in it, the warmth of a man who enjoys his work. "You may walk me to it." "I understand it maimed one of your handlers." "It removed a hand that was reaching where it had been ordered not to reach," Osk said. "It did not pursue. It has never pursued." "A disciplined predator." Salkesh sounded pleased. "You see why the division is interested. An animal that maims exactly as much as the situation requires and no more is not an animal. It is an instrument that has not yet been issued a wielder." They took the lift up through the tiers, the capture team and the ugly transport pod riding with them, and Osk watched the overseer watch the numbers climb, and understood that nothing he said in the next hour would move this man by a single degree, because the man had come with the ending already written, and only needed the station to hold still while he read it aloud. The doors opened on the high containment tier, and it was already wrong. Osk felt it before he saw it. The tier was too quiet, and the quiet had a texture, the particular held-breath quiet of a room where something is happening that no one has authority to stop. His night crew stood in a loose arc 20 paces back from Cell 9, weapons half raised and pointed at nothing, faces gone slack. Surd stood among them with her slate forgotten at her side, and nobody was looking at the transport pod or at the overseer or at Osk. They were all looking at the open cell. "Who opened that cell?" Osk said. His voice did not rise. "It went the other way, down and flat and cold," the voice he used exactly twice a year, and the arc of his crew broke and turned toward him with the relief of soldiers who have been waiting for someone senior to arrive and take the impossible thing out of their hands. The cell stood open. The great plated door was retracted into the wall, the viewing pane dark, the interior lit and empty. And the specimen was out. It was in the middle of the tier floor, in the open, 40 centimeters of plate no longer between it and 11 armed Drayani, and it was not killing anyone. It sat. It had folded its wrong-jointed limbs beneath it, and it sat in the center of the cold blue corridor as calm as a hound at a hearth. And its gold eyes were fixed, past all of them, past the raised lances and the overseer's whitening crest, on the small human cadet who stood at the far end of the ring with a ration flask in one hand and a look on her plain face that was not fear. "Sir," breathed one of the crew, "it won't, it just came out. The door, she was doing the sweep and the door just—" "Nobody move," Osk said. The cadet moved. She set the flask down against the wall, slow, The way you set a thing down when you do not want to startle a room. She did not raise her hands. She did not reach for the sidearm on her hip. Osk saw, in the frozen clarity of the moment, that her hand did not even drift toward it. She simply lowered herself down onto one knee on the cold deck of a containment tier, in front of a thing his whole station was afraid of, and she looked at it, and the corner of her mouth pulled. "There you are," said Cadet Halloran in a low, even unhurried voice, a voice with a smile buried in it. "Come here then, come on, little monster." And it went to her. It rose in that wrong hindquarters, first way, and it crossed the tier, past the overseer, whose lacquered crest it did not so much as glance at, past the capture team, whose lances tracked it and did not fire because no one had told them the world could do this, past Osk himself, close enough that he felt the cold coming off its oil-black hide, and it reached the kneeling human, and it pushed its enormous, wrong, unclassifiable head against her chest and made a sound. A subsonic sound. Osk felt it in his teeth. It was the sound a predator that size should never make toward anything it did not intend to eat. It was purring. The cadet folded forward over the dark head and put her plain human hands flat against the plates of its skull, plates that had opened a handler to the bone 8 days ago, and she scratched them the way you scratch a thing you have known a long time, and she said, so quietly that only the dead silent tear let Osk hear it, I know, I've got you." Nobody in the room breathed. Then Overseer Dragon Salkesh, fourth circle of a family that does not lose, said in a voice that had gone strange and thin, "Warden, what is that human, and why does my weapon love her?" Osk did not answer him, because there was no answer that would not make the situation worse, and because he was busy doing the only useful thing available to him, which was keeping his crew from firing. "Lances down," he said. "Down, all of you. Nothing here is under threat." He said it flat and certain as though it were true, and 11 Dryani lowered their weapons because a warden they trusted had told them the room was safe, even though every instinct they owned was screaming that it was not. Salkesh's own capture team did not lower theirs. They looked to the overseer. "Hold," Salkesh told them and stepped forward, and Osk moved to put himself a half pace ahead of the man, not quite blocking, just present, the way you stand between a war alpha and a fool. "Overseer, I would advise." "I did not ask for advice, Warden, I asked a question." Salkesh's eyes had not left the human and the animal. The specimen had settled against the cadet's chest, the great head tucked under her chin, the subsonic purr rolling out of it in waves that Osk could feel in the deck. The cadet had both arms around it now. She was not looking at the overseer. She was not looking at anyone. She had her cheek against the black plates and her eyes half closed, and she looked, Osk thought, like the only unafraid creature on a station full of predators. "That is a fleet-grade capture subject," Salkesh went on, softer now, and the softness was worse than the anger had been. "It has resisted 8 days of your handling protocols. It maimed a trained handler on intake. And it has just walked out of a live cell through 11 armed guards to lay its head on a provisional cadet as though she raised it from the shell. So, what is she?" "Her name is Cadet Halloran," Osk said. "Human Liaison Detachment, Provisional Security Cadre, 6 weeks aboard." 6 weeks, Salkesh's crest shifted. "Curator, you have had this animal 8 days and no name for it. This human has had it 6 weeks and it answers to little monster. Explain to me the difference in your methods." Sir, to her great credit, did not flinch. "I did not know she had it at all, Overseer. Neither did the warden. This is the first any of us has seen of." She gestured, helpless at the impossible tableau. "Of that." "So it is a security breach," Salkesh said, and Osk watched him decide to like the answer. Watched the man reach for the version of events that gave him the most leverage and close his hand around it. Unauthorized contact with a capture subject. Unauthorized cell access. A cadet has been operating a containment cell on your tier, Warden, for some fraction of 6 weeks without your knowledge, and you learned of it the same hour I did. He let that sit. "That is not a good hour for you." No, Osk agreed, because it was true and because agreeing cost him nothing. Cadet Halloran. She lifted her head. The animal did not. On your feet. Step away from the specimen. For a moment he thought she would refuse. He saw it move through her, the refusal, and he saw her put it down. She murmured something into the black plates. Osk did not hear the words, only the shape of them. Stay. I'll be back, stay. And she unwound her arms and stood slow and stepped back one pace, and the specimen's gold eyes came open and swung to follow her, and every Drayani in the room tensed at once. Sit, the cadet said to it low. Down, I'm right here. It sat. On the open tier, out of its cell in the middle of an armed station, the unclassifiable thing sat because a human girl told it to, and folded its wrong limbs, and kept its eyes on her and only her. Salkesh made a sound that was almost a laugh. Do you see it? He asked no one. Do you see what that is? Warden, I came here for a weapon and you have grown me a delivery system. I will take them both. You will take neither until this station understands what has happened on it, Osk said. I will take whatever cannot be classified, Warden, and by your curator's own manifest, that is the animal, and the human is a fleet asset who has demonstrated an undocumented capability the division has every right to assess. The overseer's certainty had fully returned. The strange thin fear of the first moment was gone, buried under a much more dangerous thing, which was appetite. Secure them both, separately. The cadet to guest quarters under watch. The animal, he looked at the ugly transport pod on its sled, and Osk saw the cadet see it too, saw her go very still, into the pod. No, said Cadet Halloran. It was not loud. It was the flat, absolute no of someone who has stopped negotiating. The tier went quiet in a new way. It doesn't go in a box, she said. It's been in a box for 8 days, and before that it was in a worse one for a lot longer, and if you put it in that box, overseer, with those restraint points, it's going to decide the box is the fight, and then you're going to find out what it does when it decides something is the fight. It hasn't decided that yet. 8 days, and it hasn't. You want to know why? She had not raised her voice at all. Because I asked it not to. Salkesh looked at her for a long moment. You asked it, he repeated. Yes. An uncatalogued apex predator, and you asked it. That's usually all it takes, said Cadet Halloran, with anybody if you ask right. They confined her to a bunkroom on the liaison deck with a Drayani sentry outside the hatch, and Ren Halloran sat on the edge of the bunk in the blue night cycle light and did not sleep. She was not thinking about the overseer, though she had taken his measure and did not like the shape of it. She was thinking about the sound the transport pod's restraint points had made when the grav sled rolled, a small hard clinking, and about how the specimen's eyes had gone to that sound the way her own eyes went to a raised hand. It knew what a restraint was. It had warned them. Whoever had created it before the intake shuttle, before Cordon 9, before any of them, had not asked it anything. They had bolted it down and moved it, and it had learned, the way she had once learned, that the safest thing in the world was to become very still and very economical, and to take exactly the piece of the situation that had to be taken and no more. That was the thing none of them understood. They thought the economy of what it had done to Handler Bruck was menace. She had read it as manners. She had found it on her second week of night rounds, when the tier was empty, and the cold blue light hummed, and there was nothing on the rotation but checking that the closed doors were closed. She had stopped at cell 9 because it was the only cell where the thing inside was not sleeping. It had been standing at the pane in the dark, all its wrong bands of color gone flat and still, and it had been watching the corridor the way she used to watch a doorway, and she had known that look. She had known it from the inside. So she had done the thing you are never supposed to do, the thing that was about to cost her everything, which was that she had sat down on the cold deck across from the pane, out of reach, not looking at it directly, and she had started talking. About nothing. About the boredom of the rotation and the bad ration paste and the way the station groaned when it turned. A low, even, going nowhere voice. The voice you use on a thing that has learned that voices mean hands. It had taken 4 nights before it lay down while she talked, 6 before it ate while she was there. On the 9th night she had put her palm flat against the pane, and after a while it had put the black plates of its skull against the glass on the other side, and she had felt the cold of it through the pane, and it had made the subsonic sound for the first time, and she had started calling it Little Monster because it was enormous and impossible and terrible, and it had chosen, out of a whole station of armored predators, to press its head toward the one small unarmed thing that talked to it like it was already forgiven. She had not opened the cell tonight. She wanted that on record, in whatever record was going to be made of her ruin. She had come up the outer ring on her sweep, the way the rotation had her do, and she had not stopped at 9. The warden had told her not to, and she had meant to obey him, and the door had opened on its own. Or not on its own. It had opened because the thing inside had spent 8 days learning the resonance of the seam welds, exactly as the little gray curator said, and it had been waiting. And the moment it heard her boots on the ring, it had done the thing it had figured out how to do, and simply let itself out to come to her. It had not gone for the crew. It had not gone for the doors. Out of a cracked cage on a station full of prey, it had walked the length of the tier to lay its head against her chest. And now a 4th circle overseer with a box full of restraints wanted to know what she was. Wren put her face in her hands briefly in the dark, where the sentry could not see. Then she took her face out of her hands, because self-pity was a hand she had learned not to raise against herself, and she started thinking about how to get the animal off this station before the man from the Sundering Oath put it in the box. The hatch chimed. It opened without waiting for her. Warden Osk Velen filled the frame, and behind him the sentry had the careful blank face of a soldier pretending not to listen. The warden came in and let the hatch close and stood there, too tall for the bunkroom, his plated arms folded, looking down at her with an expression she could not read at all, which was rare for her. She was good at faces. 6 weeks, he said. Sir. 2 of them, you have been sitting on the floor of my high containment tier in the dark, talking to the most dangerous unclassified animal I have ever held, and no one saw. The night rotation doesn't have tier cameras above the door line, sir. Budget. It's in the maintenance log. She said it evenly. I wasn't hiding from you. I was hiding from waking anybody up over something I couldn't explain. And now you cannot explain it to me either. No, sir. Not in a way that'll sound like anything, but what the overseer already decided it is. Osk was quiet a moment. Try, he said, and there was something underneath the word, and Wren looked up sharply and understood that the warden had not come to interrogate her. He had come because he had watched a thing he feared walk past his own guards to a stranger, and it had done something to him, the way it had done something to her that first night, and he needed to know if there was a name for it that was not breach and not asset and not weapon. So she told him the truth, because he had asked right. It's not tame, Wren said. I want to be clear about that first because everybody's going to want it to be tame and it isn't. I didn't break it. I didn't train it. It could take this whole tier apart and walk out the dock, and there's nothing on this station that could stop it, and it knows that, and I know that, and it knows I know. She turned her hands over in her lap. It stays because it decided to, and it decided to because I'm the first thing in a long time that wanted something from it that wasn't a use. She looked up at him. You said it maimed your handler and didn't pursue. You called that discipline. The overseer called it a disciplined weapon. It's not discipline, sir. It's grief. It's a thing that's been used its whole life being careful not to become the thing everyone's already decided it is. I know that look because I've worn it. It ran to me because I'm the only one here who looked at it and saw a person having a bad life instead of a problem that needed solving. She stopped. That's the whole of it. That's what I am, warden. I'm the one who didn't reach for it. Osk Velen stood in the small blue room for a long time. The overseer means to take it, he said finally. And now you. He has the law. Uncatalogued fauna has no protection, and you have given him a capability to appropriate. By the station's own manifest, I cannot stop him. I know. I am telling you what I cannot do, Osk said, so that you will understand what I am about to try to do anyway. The station commander would not fight for it. Osk had known that before he walked into the command ring, and the walk confirmed it. Commander Ravel Asandi was third circle, careful, 3 rotations from a pension he intended to collect intact, and he listened to Osk lay out the case with the pained expression of a man who has already chosen and resents being made to feel the choosing. You want me to obstruct a 4th circle writ, Asandi said, over an animal your own curator cannot name and a cadet who committed 6 separate protocol violations to bond with it. I want you to buy time. If CERD classifies the specimen, it becomes protected fauna and the writ does not apply. That is not obstruction, Commander. That is procedure. And if she does not classify it, I have spent standing I do not have on a picked fight. The commander turned his slate face down, which on him was the gesture of a man ending a conversation. The division's interest is noted, Warden. The division's writ is valid. You will render every assistance to Overseer Salkesh consistent with station safety. That is the order. Do you require it in text? No, Commander. Then render it, Asandi said, and Osk, get your curator her name if you can, quietly. I will not stand in the Overseer's road, but I will not weep if the road turns out to be closed when he reaches it. It was the most spine the man had, and Osk took it because it was more than nothing. He found CERD in the containment lab with her eyes rimmed dark and 9 displays, throwing genetic ribbons across the walls. And he found that she had gone somewhere past exhaustion into a flat, clear country where she was, for the first time in 8 days, not afraid. It's not one thing, she said before he could speak. That's why I couldn't name it. I kept trying to file it as a species, and it isn't a species, Warden, it's an argument. Look. She threw a ribbon up on the main wall, a double strand knotted with strange, dense passages. This sequence here is engineered, not evolved, built. There are junctions in this genome that nature does not make. Someone spliced apex traits from at least 4 predator lineages into a single line and stabilized it, which should not be possible, which is a thing 3 governments have spent fortunes failing to do. Somebody did it. And then, she pulled up a second ribbon, and her voice changed, and then they kept doing it. This animal is the 9th stable generation of a program to build a controllable apex predator. A living weapon that would take a wielder. They bred for lethality and they bred for biddability in the same line, and Warden, they could not get both. Every generation was either too dangerous to keep or too dull to be worth keeping. This one, she gestured at the wall at the impossible knotted code, this one they logged as a failure, too intelligent. It would not bond to a handler on command. It chose. And a weapon that chooses its own wielder is not a weapon, so they created the failure for disposal, and the disposal shuttle was intercepted by a custom sweep, and the custom sweep could not classify live cargo it had no manifest for, and it ended up here. She sat down heavily. It is not uncatalogued because it is unknown, Warden. It is uncatalogued because it is illegal. Somebody built it in the dark and it is evidence. Osk absorbed that. Can you classify it? I can do better than classify it. CERD's tired eyes came up and there was fight in them. I can document it as a product of prohibited genome forge trafficking, which makes it not fauna at all but material evidence in a capital-tier smuggling case, which cannot be appropriated by anyone, Fleet Weapons Division included, until an inquiry board releases it. Salkesh cannot take evidence. No writ overrides an open capital inquiry. She almost smiled. I need 11 hours to compile it to evidentiary standard. Give me 11 hours, and I take his prize out from under him with paperwork. He birthed early to deny us time, Osk said slowly. He will move early to deny us these 11 hours. Then you had better be slow to help him, said CERD, in whatever ways a warden can be slow. Osk found ways. The transport pod's grav sled developed a fault in its stabilizer coil that the maintenance queue could not address for some hours. Osk signed the work order himself and made sure the fault was real. A small, honest failure introduced by an honest tap of a diagnostic probe in the wrong port. The high containment tier required a full safety recertification before any live transfer could be authorized across it, per a regulation Osk had personally never enforced, and now enforced with tearful rigor. The station's legal officer needed to review the interaction of a division writ with an unclassified specimen, and the legal officer was, conveniently, Surd's second cousin and slow. By the third hour, Salkesh understood exactly what was happening to him and stopped pretending not to. He came to the containment tier without his capture team, which was itself a message, and he found Osk standing at the dark pane of cell 9. The specimen was back inside it now, coaxed in by the cadet before they took her away, and it lay against the inside of the pane in the exact spot where, Osk now knew, a human girl used to sit on the other side of the glass and talk to it about ration paste. "You are a competent obstructionist, Warden," Salkesh said. "I mean that as the compliment it is. The coil fault was elegant. The recertification was almost shameless." He came to the pane beside Osk and looked in at the animal. It did not look back at him. It kept its eyes on the empty stretch of deck where the cadet used to sit. "You have perhaps bought your curator half a day. Do you know what I have that half a day cannot buy back? Enlighten me." "Patience and a cutter and a writ that does not expire." Salkesh's voice was almost gentle. "I do not need to win this hour, Warden. I need only to still be standing here when your delays run out, and they will run out. Your commander will not spend himself. Your curator will file her clever evidence, and an inquiry board 3 sectors away will take a year to convene, and I will petition that board for custody of the material evidence as a specialist facility better equipped to preserve it than a holding station, which is true, and I will very likely be granted it. And in the meantime I will simply wait right here and be pleasant to you." He turned from the pane. Or, Osk said, "or you give me the human now, uncontested, and I lose interest in the animal." Salkesh watched Osk's face for it. "That is the trade I actually came to make, once I understood what I was looking at. I do not want an illegal beast that will be tied up in inquiry for a year. I want the capability. Whatever your cadet is, whatever it is she does, that is the asset the division cannot build. We have spent 9 generations trying to build a weapon that bonds. And a plain human girl walked onto your station and a weapon bonded to her in 6 weeks for free. I do not need the weapon, Warden. I need the girl who makes weapons love her. Give me Cadet Halloran, willingly transferred to division study, and I will leave your evidence to rot in your inquiry, and you will have saved your animal. 1 human for the beast. You strike me as a man who counts costs. Count that 1. Osk looked through the pane at the thing that was watching an empty patch of deck, and he thought about the cadet's flat voice saying I'm the one who didn't reach for it, and he understood that the overseer had found the one trade that cost the station nothing and cost Osk everything, and that this was the family's true talent, the thing his teachers had drilled into him under another name. Arrange for the thing your enemy is fighting to have already lost, so that all that remains is to choose which way it loses. I will consider it, Osk said, because he needed the hours, and because a warden learns to say words he does not mean without letting them touch him. Salkesh smiled, satisfied, and left the tier, and Osk stood at the pane a while longer, and then, when he was certain the corridor was empty, he did a thing he had not planned to do. He keyed the pane's audio pickup, the one-way channel handlers used to speak into a cell, and he leaned close to the glass, and he said low to the impossible animal that would not look away from the empty deck. "She is not gone, do you understand me? She is not gone, I am going to bring her back to you." He felt absurd. He was a warden of the second circle speaking promises to a specimen through a pane. "But you have to give me the hours the way you gave them to her. You have to be still a little longer. Can you do that?" The specimen turned its head. For the first time it looked at Osk, really looked. the gold eyes tracking off the empty deck and onto his face, and it held him the way it had held him that first day, measuring whether he was worth the walk. And then, slowly, it laid its chin back down against the inside of the pane in the cadet's spot and closed its eyes, and Osk chose to believe that meant yes. He was halfway to the lift when his cuff chimed, and it was Surd, and her voice had lost all its earlier fight. "Warden, he's not waiting for the inquiry." The words came fast and low. The sundering oath just filed an emergency biohazard declaration on the specimen, claiming it as a live prohibited bioweapon that poses an active containment risk to the station. A biohazard declaration lets a weapons division officer take immediate custody without an inquiry, without a writ review, without anything, on grounds of station safety. It supersedes my evidence. It supersedes your recertification. It supersedes the commander. She drew a breath. He's coming for it now. And Warden, the declaration authorizes lethal disposal on site if the subject cannot be safely secured for transport. He's not going to take it in a box. If it's so much as Flex's wrong, he has the paper to put it down on your tier and call it public safety. Osk did not go to the command ring to argue the declaration. He had learned enough of the family to know that arguing was the delay Salkesh wanted him to spend. He went to the liaison deck, and he dismissed the sentry outside Cadet Halloran's hatch with a word the sentry was glad to obey, and he opened the hatch himself. She was on her feet before it finished sliding. She had not been sleeping. Her cap was off and her dark hair was loose, and she looked younger without it and not 1 degree less steady. "He's moving," she said. It was not a question. "I felt the station change. The pumps on the high tier just spun up. That's the biohazard scrub cycle. He's declaring it a hazard." "How do you know the scrub cycle?" "I do the night rounds, sir. You learn what the station sounds like when it's afraid." She was already reaching for her cap. "He's going to put it down, isn't he? He's decided he can't have the girl and the beast both, so he's going to take the girl and delete the leverage." "He is going to try," Osk said. "You are going to make it so that he cannot. You are the only creature on this station that can keep that animal from giving him the excuse the declaration needs. If it stays calm, he has no hazard. If it stays calm, it is only a frightened, illegal, valuable thing that an inquiry can still save. He needs it to flex wrong. You are going to make sure it does not." She looked at him. "You're letting me out to control it, so he can't kill it." "Yes." "And when this is over, whatever way it ends," Wren said, "you're going to be a second circle warden who released a confined cadet against a fourth circle biohazard declaration. He'll have your posting, maybe your circle." "Yes," Osk said again, and found that saying it did not move him at all, which surprised him, because he had spent 9 years being a man who counted costs. "Cadet, when we reach that tier, you will do exactly what you have already been doing for 6 weeks. You will be the one who does not reach for it, and I will handle the overseer. Is that understood?" "You can't handle him, sir." She said it gently, pulling her cap on, tucking the loose hair away, becoming the plain provisional cadet again. "Men like that you don't handle, you just outlast." She met his eyes. "But I'll keep it calm. It'll stay calm for me. That part I can promise you." They went up through the tiers fast, and the station had indeed changed around them. The scrub pumps drummed in the walls, and the night crew they passed had the wide-eyed look of people who had been ordered to clear a deck and not told why. On the high containment lift, Osk keyed his override and the car climbed, and Wren stood beside him small and still, and just before the doors opened she said, not to him, quietly as though rehearsing, "Easy. I'm here. Easy, little monster." And then the doors opened on the tier, and the scene was already set for the ending Salkesh had written. The overseer stood before Cell 9 with his full capture team, 6 now, not 2. The long sedation lances charged and the ugly transport pod open on its sled with its restraint points gaping. 2 more of his division stood at the tier's environmental panel. The biohazard scrub had the corridor lit in the hard amber of a hazard cycle, and the cold blue nightlight was gone, and the whole tier looked like the inside of a warning. The cell pane was clear. The specimen was on its feet inside it, and its bands of bruise color were sliding fast across its flanks now, faster than Osk had ever seen, and it was not pacing. It was standing square to the pane, and it was looking at the lances. And Osk understood with a drop in his gut that the animal knew exactly what the lances were, and exactly what the box was, and that it had, in the last few minutes, begun at last to decide that this was the fight. "Warden," Salkesh said without turning, pleased and unsurprised, "you have brought me the human after all. Efficient. Put her with the others." "Open the audio channel to the cell," Wren said. The whole tier looked at her. She had not raised her voice. She stood just off the lift, small and amber-lit, and she was not looking at the overseer or the lances or Osk. She was looking at the animal through the pane, and the animal had swung its gold eyes onto her the instant the doors opened, and the fast-sliding colors on its flanks had slowed, just slightly, just enough for Osk to see. "That subject is under an active biohazard declaration," Salkesh said. "It will be secured for transport or disposed on site. It is not going to be talked to, Cadet." "It's deciding whether to fight your men right now," Wren said, in the same flat, even voice, still not looking away from the pane. "Look at its sides, the color. It does that when it's making up its mind. You've got maybe a minute before it decides your lances are the thing it has to go through to get out of that box you're holding open, and I promise you, Overseer, when it decides that, your paper isn't going to matter because there won't be enough left of this tier to file it in." She finally looked at him. "Open the channel. Let me talk it down. Or don't, and find out what a 9th-generation Apex weapon does when it stops being careful." Osk watched the Overseer weigh it, and watched the weighing take 1 second too long, and stepped past him to the pane and keyed the audio channel himself. "Warden," one of the capture team began. "It is open," Osk said to Wren. "Go." And Wren Halloran walked forward, past the lances, past the Overseer, right up to the clear pane of Cell 9, and she put her plain human hand flat against the glass over the animal's face, and she leaned in close to the pickup and she talked. Hey, it's me. I know the lights are wrong and it smells like the scrub and there's a lot of them, and I know exactly what that box is. I saw it too and I hate it too." Her voice never rose and never sped up. It rolled out low and unhurried, the going nowhere voice, and Osk watched the impossible thing on the other side of the glass go still by degrees, the fast colors slowing, the great head lowering until its brow met her palm through the pane. "You've been so good. 8 days and you've been so good, and I need you to be good a little more. Not for them, for me, you hear me. For me, I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever they do, I'm going to be right here on the other side of the glass, and you're going to be still, and we're going to outlast them. Okay? Easy. Easy, little monster. I've got you." The specimen laid its head against the pane under her hand and closed its eyes, and the bruised colors on its flanks slowed and went nearly still, and the subsonic purr came up out of it and rolled through the deck plates and into the boots of every Drayani on the tier, and the sound was not menace. Even Salkesh's hardest capture hand lowered the tip of his lance a hand's breadth without meaning to. For a moment nobody spoke. The scrub pumps drummed. The amber hazard light lay over all of them. Then from 3 cells down the tier, from Cell 6, where the station held a Vorlish razorback that had killed 2 handlers on its home world and had not let a Drayani within reach in the year it had been aboard, there came a low sound. A deep, resonant, answering sound. And from Cell 11, another. And from somewhere down the ring, a third and a fourth, until the whole high containment tier was full of it. A low chorus rolling out of a dozen sealed cells. A dozen of the galaxy's most dangerous held predators all making the same low sound at once. And Osk felt the hair rise along his spine and saw his crew go white, because he understood and they understood what they were hearing. They were answering her. Every caged predator on the tier had heard the human's low, even voice come through the corridor, and every one of them was answering it. the way a pack answers when the one who feeds it in the dark walks the line. Wren Halloran had not tamed one animal on Cordon 9. She had, in 6 weeks of boring night rounds, walking a rotation nobody wanted, stopping at pains nobody stopped at, talking in a low, going-nowhere voice to things everyone else was too afraid to look at. She had, without anyone noticing, without meaning anything by it, become the voice the whole menagerie waited for in the dark. Overseer Dragon Salkesh, fourth circle, of a family that does not lose, stood in the amber light on a tier full of answering monsters and looked at the small plain human with her hand on the pane. And for the second time in one day Osk watched the strange thin fear cross his face. "What," said the overseer very quietly, "is she?" Osk answered before the cadet could, because he wanted the record to carry his voice and not hers. "She is a security cadet of the Human Liaison Detachment, Overseer, and what you are hearing is not a capability. It is a warning. You have a tier full of apex predators telling you, in the only language they own, that the small creature at that pane is not to be touched. If you are wise, you will hear it. I hear an asset the division has spent a fortune failing to manufacture, walking around loose in a provisional's uniform," Salkesh said. The fear had already left him. Osk watched it go, watched the man do the thing his family did, which was to convert every terror into a valuation. "You misunderstand me, Warden. A moment ago I offered you a trade, the girl for the beast, because I believed the girl was the smaller prize. I was wrong. I have just watched a dozen sealed predators answer her voice. She is not the smaller prize. She is the only prize. The animal is a curiosity. She is the thing that makes the animal possible, and if she can do it to one illegal weapon, the division needs to know whether she can do it to 100 legal ones." He gestured, and 2 of his capture team peeled off the line toward Wren. "Secure the cadet, gently. She is fleet property now and valuable, and I want no bruises on my acquisition. As for the specimen," he did not even look at the cell, "the declaration is filed. Vent the cell and administer disposal. We will study the corpse. A dead sample tells the division everything a live one would and costs nothing to ship." "No," Osk said, and stepped into the path of the 2 capture hands and did not move. It was not a large thing. He simply stood, a warden of the second circle, unarmed, between 2 of the overseer's division and the small human at the pane, and he did not move. The capture hands stopped, because they were soldiers and a senior officer was in their road, and their orders had not accounted for that, and they looked back at Salkesh. "Warden," Salkesh said, with the patience of a man addressing a child who has wandered onto a landing pad, "step aside. I will not ask twice, and the second time will be on a charge sheet." "Put it on the sheet," Osk said. "Put all of it on the sheet. Put that you birthed a weapons cutter early to deny a holding station time. Put that you filed a biohazard declaration you know to be false, because that animal has been sealed behind rated plate for 8 days and has posed a hazard to no one, and a false hazard declaration to seize custody is a fleet crime, overseer, whatever your circle. Put that you ordered the disposal of prohibited forged material evidence in an open smuggling matter, and put my name under all of it, because I intend to be the witness who remembers it in front of the board." He held the overseer's eyes. "You are a man who arranges for things to have already lost before he arrives, so arrange this. I am not going to move, and there are 11 of my crew on this tier who just heard me say why, and a curator 3 decks down compiling every word to evidentiary standard as we speak. You can take the girl over my body and put down the animal in front of my crew, and you will have your prize, and you will spend the next 3 years of your career explaining it to a board. Or, Salkesh said, his crest had gone very still. Or you undock, and you file your interest through the inquiry like a lawful officer, and you let the board decide whether the division gets its asset. That is the slow road. But it is the one that does not end your career on a holding station arguing with a stubborn second circle over a cadet." Osk did not blink. "Count that cost, overseer. You are good at it. For a long moment the tier held, the scrub pumps drummed. The caged monsters had gone quiet, all of them listening, and the specimen stood at the pane with its head under the cadet's hand, and its gold eyes fixed now not on the lances, but on the overseer, steady and unblinking. And Osk had the sudden certain sense that the animal understood the shape of what was happening even if it did not own the words, that it knew a decision was being made about it, and that it had already decided what it would do depending on which way the decision fell. Salkesh smiled. "You make a fine speech, Warden," he said. "You would have done well in the circles if you had a family behind you, but you have made one error, and it is the error of honest men, which is that you have assumed I care about the board." He spread his hands. "I have a biohazard declaration. It is filed. Under it I do not need the board's permission. I need only its later forgiveness, and forgiveness is cheaper than permission and easier to buy. By the time your curator's evidence convenes a hearing, the animal will be a preserved sample in a division vault, and the cadet will be a division specialist with 3 years of study behind her and a comfortable posting, and no board unwinds a thing that is already 3 years done. You are trying to win the hour. I have already won the year." He turned to his capture team, dismissing Osk with the turn. "Vent the cell, secure the girl. We are finished here." And a capture hand raised his lance toward the pane and keyed the cell's external vent, and the great plated door of cell 9 began, with a hiss of the hazard scrub, to retract. "Wait," Wren said. She turned from the pane. She did not look afraid. That was the thing Osk would remember after, when he tried to describe it to the board and to himself, that in the moment the disposal lance came up and the cell door began to open on the thing she loved, the human girl did not look afraid. She looked sorry. She looked at the overseer the way you look at a man who is about to do something to himself that cannot be taken back. And she said, in the same low, even voice she used on the animals, gentle, almost kind, "Please don't. I'm asking you the way I ask them. I'm asking right. Please don't open that door and raise that lance, because I can keep it calm behind the pane, and I can keep it calm on a lead, and I can keep it calm all the way onto your cutter and into your vault if that's how this has to go, but I can't keep it calm if you open that cell and point a lance at it while it can see me being grabbed. Nobody could. It's not going to let that happen. Not to it. Not to me." Her voice never rose. "So please, close the door, take me the slow way. And everybody walks off this tier." "Secure her," said Salkesh. The capture hand behind Wren closed his hand around her arm and pulled. And the specimen came out of the opening cell. Afterward, Osk could never assemble it into a sequence. He had spent his life training his eye to hold fast-moving predators in frame, to break a charge into its parts so that a warden could answer each one. And this he could not break into parts. There was the capture hand's grip closing on the cadet's arm. There was a sound, not a roar, nothing so warm as a roar, but a single hard exhalation of air displaced by something crossing a space faster than that size should be able to cross it. There was the cold of the thing going past him, close, the oil-black hide, the wrong-jointed limbs already unfolding into a shape Osk's eye refused to keep. And then there was the far wall of the tier, and the amber hazard light, and the specimen standing in the middle of the floor with its flanks running black and bruise, and the tier gone silent, and it was over, and Osk had not seen the middle of it and knew, with a warden's certainty, that he was fortunate not to have. He made himself look at the cost. The capture hand who had put his grip on the cadet was down, against the base of the pane, curled and holding his forearm, alive, moving, cursing low, alive with his lance nowhere near him, snapped clean and lying in 2 pieces 4 meters apart. The second capture hand, the one who had raised the disposal lance toward the cell, was on his back with the wind gone out of him and the specimen's forefoot planted on his chest. Not crushing, just weight. Just the enormous cold weight of a thing that had decided he would lie still now, and his lance was up in the ceiling trusses where it had fired once into nothing, a scorch mark on the plating and no more. The 4 others of the team stood frozen with their lances half raised and their nerve entirely gone, because they had just watched their two hardest hands taken out of the fight between one breath and the next by something that had then simply stopped, and was now looking at them, and was waiting. That was the part that broke the overseer's men, not the speed, the stopping. A beast that mauled and kept mauling was a thing they were trained for. A beast that took exactly the two who had moved and no others, and then set its foot on a chest, and lifted its gold eyes, and waited to see whether anyone else intended to make a mistake. That was not an animal, and every soldier on that tier knew it, and not one of them was willing to be the next mistake. The specimen looked at Wren. She had been let go the instant it moved. The capture hand's grip had opened when the rest of him found more urgent business. She stood by the pane with her arm red where the grip had been and her cap knocked crooked, and she was already reaching for the animal with her voice, already low and even and unhurried, already the one who did not reach with her hands. "Okay," she said, "okay. I see them, I see you. You did good, you stopped. You stopped, and that's the whole thing, that's the hardest thing, and you did it." She took one step toward it, off the pane into the open floor, past the frozen lances, and no one moved to stop her because no one on that tier was going to put a hand near the small human the animal had just crossed a room to protect. "Off him now. Gently. He's done. Look at me, off him. Down, it's finished. Down, it's finished." The specimen lifted its forefoot off the pinned man's chest. It backed away from him, that wrong hindquarters, first motion, and it came to Wren, and it lowered its enormous head and pushed its brow against her middle, and the bruised colors on its flanks slowed and stilled, and the subsonic purr came up out of it and rolled through the deck, and she folded over it and put her human hands flat on the plates that had just, off in the blur Osk could not reconstruct, ended a fight before it started, and she said into it, quiet only for it, "I've got you. I've got you, it's finished." Nobody breathed. The pinned man crawled backward across the deck toward his own line. The one with the broken forearm got himself upright against the pane. And the whole tier of caged monsters, who had gone silent to listen, began again. Lo, that deep resonant answering chorus. A dozen apex predators behind rated plate, all making the same sound at once toward the small human folded over the specimen in the amber light. And this time Osk understood it not as a warning, but as something older and simpler. The sound a pack makes when the one it waited for has done the thing the pack would have done, and lived. Overseer Dragon Salkesh, fourth circle of a family that does not lose, stood on the tier with two of his hardest hands down and four more useless with fear, and a false biohazard declaration filed in his name, and he had gone entirely white in the crest, and he said nothing at all, because there was nothing left for a man like him to say that would not be, forever after, the thing he had said on the tier at Cordon 9. Osk gave him the silence. It was the cruelest thing he owned. Then he keyed his cuff, open channel, station-wide, so that the record would carry it to every deck and could never be quietly deleted, and he said, in the flat, even voice he used twice a year, "Command Warden Velen, High Containment Tier. Log the following. At the environmental panel timestamp, Overseer Dragon Salkesh, under a biohazard declaration this station will contest as false, ordered the on-site disposal of contested evidence and the physical seizure of a station cadet. A member of his capture team laid hands on the cadet. The specimen defended her. Two of the Overseer's team are injured, both recovering, both wounded in the act of a seizure this warden had verbally refused and declared unlawful. No member of Cordon 9's crew raised a weapon. The specimen did not pursue, did not escalate, and stood down on the cadet's command inside 3 seconds. Full sensor record preserved and copied off station to the inquiry board this hour. He lowered the cuff and looked at Salkesh across the amber tier. "You wanted to know what she is, Overseer. I will tell you now for the record, and you may carry it to whatever board unmakes your career. She is the reason your weapon stopped. Your generations of forge work could not build a beast that would stand down. She built one in 6 weeks with her voice for free, and you have just watched it do the one thing your whole program failed 9 times to make it do, and you tried to have it shot before it could. Osk let that land. You did not come here for a weapon that obeys, Overseer. You came here and found one, and it obeyed her, and you could not stand it, so you reached for the lance. That is what the board will read. That is what the station just heard. That is what I will say under oath until they carry me out of the circle. Salkesh's mouth worked. The declaration is false, and you know it is false, and there are now 400 witnesses to the timestamp. Osk stepped back and gestured almost courteous toward the lift. Collect your injured, Overseer. Take them to our medical bay. We will treat them because we are not a weapons cutter and we do not leave the wounded to make a point. Then get off my tier. The Overseer collected his injured and left the tier, and Osk made the mistake, for perhaps a quarter of an hour, of believing it was over. They got the specimen back into cell 9, which is to say, Wren walked it in, talking the whole way, and it went because she asked it to, and it lay down in her spot against the pane and watched her through the glass as the great plated door rolled shut. The scrub cycle wound down. The amber hazard light gave way to the cold, honest blue of the night cycle. Osk's crew came out of their frozen ark and began, with shaking hands, to do the small, ordinary work of a tier, logging, checking seals, pretending their nerve had never left them. Surd came up from her lab at a run, took one look at the tier and the 2 pieces of a snapped sedation lance, and said, "I heard the station-wide. Warden, tell me you have the sensor record copied off station." And Osk told her it was already 3 sectors gone, and the little gray curator sat down on a maintenance crate and put her face in her hands, and it was the first time Osk had ever seen her do it. Then the station-wide chimed, and it was not Osk's channel, and it was the Overseer. Salkesh had gone back to the Sundering Oath, and from the Sundering Oath he spoke to every deck of Cordon 9 at once, and his voice had changed. The pleasantness was gone. The valuation was gone. What was left was the thing underneath, the thing the family kept lacquered over with manners, and it was ugly and it was afraid, and it was, therefore, more dangerous than anything Osk had faced all day. Cordon 9. This is Overseer Dragon Salkesh, Fleet Weapons Division, acting under an active biohazard declaration and division emergency authority. Your station has, in the last hour, assaulted fleet personnel, obstructed a lawful seizure, and demonstrated that it cannot safely contain a declared bioweapon. I am therefore invoking division protective custody of this station. The Sundering Oath has locked your dock clamps and your outer buoys. No vessel arrives or departs without my release. A division boarding party will proceed to the high containment tier to secure the declared specimen and the associated fleet asset, Cadet Halloran, for immediate removal. Any member of the Cordon crew who obstructs the boarding party will be treated as obstructing Fleet Weapons Division under emergency authority, and I remind you that under that authority I do not require a board. Warden Velen, Commander Asundi, you have 30 minutes to produce the specimen and the cadet at the high dock, secured, or my party comes and takes them, and everything that happens after that is on your sheet, not mine. The channel cut. The tier was very quiet. He can't, Surd said. The declaration doesn't. He can, Osk said. For 30 minutes or an hour or however long it takes the board to countermand him, he can do exactly this, because he has a cutter and we have a holding station, and the difference between a lawful order and an unlawful one at this range is measured in how long help takes to arrive. He knows the board will unmake him. He has stopped trying not to be unmade. He is trying to have the girl and the sample in his hold before the unmaking lands, because a thing already done is hard to undo, and the family plays for the thing already done. Osk was already moving toward the lift. Curator, where is your evidence? Compiled to evidentiary standard 19 minutes ago and transmitted to the board with the censor record, Surd said, hurrying after him. But the board is 3 sectors out. A courier response is 9 hours minimum. Warden, in 30 minutes there is no board. There is only him and us. Then in 30 minutes it is not a legal question, Osk said. It is a question of who is willing to stand on the line. Wake the commander. Wake all of him. Tell him his tier is about to be boarded by a weapons party over a false declaration with the whole station's sensors watching, and ask him whether he wants to be the third circle who handed over a cadet to be carried off by a disgraced overseer, or the one who stood on his own dock and said no. He stopped at the lift and looked back at Surd. And curator, when they come, they are not coming to a tier full of frightened keepers. Get me every handler and every guard who can stand, and get them onto that dock, unarmed, in uniform, in a line. Not to fight. We will not win a fight with a weapons boarding party, and we will not start one. We are going to make him walk his Marines through a line of cordon crew, on camera, to drag off a provisional cadet and shoot an animal that stood down on command. Let him do that in front of the record. Let the board see what he made his own soldiers do. Wren felt the dock clamps engage through the deck the way she felt everything, and she knew what it meant before the station-wide told her, and she was already talking to the animal through the pane when Osk's runner came for her. She did not go to the dock at first. She went nowhere. She sat on the cold deck in her old spot outside Cell 9, out of the crew's way, with her back to the pane, and the specimen's brow pressed against the glass behind her head, and she let herself have exactly 3 breaths of being afraid. They were going to come with guns to take it into a box, and she could not stop guns, and the one thing she had, the one thing she had ever had, was that she could keep it calm, and calm was not going to be enough this time. 3 breaths. Then she put the fear down because it was a hand, and she had learned long before Cordon 9 that you do not let a raised hand stay raised, not even your own. She turned around and put her palm to the pane, and the specimen put its brow to the other side, and she looked at the impossible gold eyes and thought about the thing the overseer had said, that she was the only prize, that she made weapons love her. He had it backward, the way they all had it backward. She did not make anything love her. She had simply been, her whole life, on the wrong side of enough raised hands to recognize the look of a creature waiting for the next one. And when she found that look, she did the only thing that had ever helped her, which was to sit down out of reach and talk in a low voice until the waiting eased. That was not a capability. It was a scar that had learned to be useful. They're going to come, she told it low. And I'm going to go out and stand where they can see me, because if I'm out there in the light calm, they can't say I'm a hazard being smuggled off, and they can't say you're loose. And every minute they spend looking at a calm girl and a sealed cell is a minute closer to the board waking up and ending this. So I'm going to leave the tier. Not because I'm going with them. Because I'm going to go be boring and calm in front of a lot of cameras until a disgraced man runs out of 30 minutes. She pressed her palm flat. I need you to stay, all the way stay. Whatever you hear out there, whatever it sounds like, you stay behind this glass, because the second you come through it, you give him the hazard he needs, and then the cameras stop being on my side. You understand me? Stay. Be still, outlast them for me. The specimen made the subsonic sound, low, and laid its chin against the deck in her spot, and closed its eyes, and Wren chose to believe that meant yes, the same way the warden had, though neither of them knew yet that the other had made the same small foolish promise to the same impossible animal through the same pain. She got up. She fixed her cap. She became the plain provisional cadet again, unremarkable, dark-eyed, steady, and she walked off the high containment tier toward the dock where a boarding party was coming to take her, and she did not look back, because if she looked back she would have to see the gold eyes following her, and she needed her voice level for the cameras. The high dock of Cordon 9 was a long bright bay of steel and cold light, and when the Sundering Oaths boarding party came down the umbilical, they came down it into a wall. Osk had made the wall out of his people, 60 of them, every handler and guard and technician who could stand, and half the day crew who had woken to the station wide and come up without being asked. They stood across the mouth of the dock in a line 4 deep, in uniform, unarmed, hands empty and down at their sides, and they did not move. Surd stood at one end of the line with her slate held up and recording. The station's own dock cameras stood on every truss. And in the center of the line, plain and small and steady, with her cap straight and her hands loose, stood Cadet Ren Halloran, because Osk had put her where the cameras would see her best, calm and unbound and manifestly not a hazard being smuggled anywhere. Commander Asundi stood in front of the line. That had surprised Osk more than anything else in a day full of surprises. He had expected to have to stand there himself and take the charge on his own circle. Instead, the third circle commander, who was 3 rotations from a pension he intended to collect intact, had come up to the dock in his formal harness and planted himself in front of 60 of his people. And when Osk had started to speak, he had said, "Lo, I saw the tear feed, Warden. I saw what that man ordered done to a cadet on my station. I have spent 9 years signing away every hard choice to keep a quiet posting, and I find at the very end of it that I have one left that I do not want to sign away. Stand at my shoulder. Let an old third circle do one thing before he retires." So Osk stood at his shoulder, and the boarding party came down the umbilical. 8 Division Marines armored, carrying the heavy stun carbines of a party expecting resistance, and behind them Overseer Dragon Saul Kesh in his lacquered harness, and the ugly transport pod on its sled bringing up the rear. The Marines reached the bottom of the ramp and stopped, because there was a wall of unarmed people in their road, and their carbines were up and no one in the road had flinched. And the front rank of Marines did the thing soldiers do when the situation does not match the briefing, which was to look, very slightly, back over their shoulders for the officer. "Commander Asundi," Salkesh came through his own Marines to the front. "You are obstructing a division boarding party under emergency authority. Clear your people from this dock." "No," said the commander. It was the same flat human word the cadet had used on the tier, and Osk wondered, distantly, whether the old Drayani had learned it from her. "You misunderstand your position, Commander." "I understand it perfectly, Overseer, for the first time in 9 years. Asundi's voice did not rise. "You have locked my dock and buoyed my station, and you are pointing carbines at 60 unarmed keepers, over a biohazard declaration that this station's own curator will testify is false, to seize a cadet who is standing in front of you calm and unbound and asking nothing, but to be left alone. There are 40 cameras on this dock. There is a sensor record of your tier, already 3 sectors gone. And your Marines." He looked past Salkesh at the 8 armored soldiers and raised his voice for the first time, just enough, so that it would carry to them and to the record. "Your Marines are about to be ordered to put hands on unarmed keepers and drag a provisional cadet off a station in front of the whole of the fleet's eventual attention. I have met Division Marines. They are hard soldiers and they follow orders. But every one of them is going to spend the rest of his service being the Marine who did this on camera, for a man who birthed early and lied about a hazard because a human girl embarrassed him. So," he folded his arms, "give the order, Overseer. Let us all find out together whether your Marines will carry it." The dock held its breath, and Ren Halloran stepped out of the line. Osk's heart stopped. She stepped out through the front rank, past the commander, into the empty stretch of steel between the wall of keepers and the 8 raised carbines, small and plain and entirely alone, and she put her hands up, not high, not surrender, just open, just visible, the way you show a frightened creature you hold nothing. And she walked halfway across the gap and stopped, and she looked at Salkesh, and she spoke in the low, even voice that carried in the silence to every camera and every Marine. "You don't have to make them do it," she said. "I'll come." "Cadet," Osk started. "I'll come," she said again, still looking at the Overseer. "You want me." "Not the animal, you said it yourself. On the tier, the animal's just a curiosity, it's me you can't build. So here I am. You don't need 8 Marines and a locked dock and a lie about a hazard. You just need me to walk up that ramp, and I will. I'll walk onto your cutter right now willingly on camera, and your Marines never have to touch a single one of these people." She took one more step and stopped, and her voice stayed gentle and it stayed level and it went underneath, absolutely cold. "On one condition. You leave the animal here, alive, in its cell. You call off the disposal, you strike the declaration, you unlock the dock, and you take me, the thing you actually came for, and you go. That's the trade. That's the real one. The one you were always going to have to make. She tilted her head. Or you can tell all these cameras that you're not actually here for a hazard at all, that you'll only take the girl if you also get to shoot the thing that loves her. Go on. Tell them which it is, Overseer. Everyone's watching. Which do you want more, the asset or the killing? And Osk watched Dragon Salkesh, fourth circle of a family that does not lose, make the mistake that finished him, because he was a man who had been embarrassed on a tier by a provisional cadet and a beast, and the wound of it had gone deeper than his valuation, all the way down to the ugly afraid thing under the lacquer. And it wanted, more than it wanted the asset, more than it wanted his career, more than it wanted anything, to not let her win. I want both, he said. Marines, take the cadet and detail 2 to the tier to dispose of the specimen. Now, 2 Marines broke from the party and started up toward the tier lift, and the front rank leveled their carbines and started forward toward the cadet, and that was the moment the whole station began to come apart at the seams, and it was Ren Halloran who held it together. It started 3 decks up in high containment, and it rolled down through the station like a tide. The menagerie began to answer, all of it at once, not the low measured chorus of before, but something risen and ragged and enormous. A dozen apex predators throwing themselves against rated plate, and the deck plates of the high dock rang with it, and the Marines advancing on Ren faltered mid-step as the sound came up through their boots. And under all of it, deeper than all of it, came a slow rhythmic hammering, spaced and deliberate, a thing striking the same seam of the same wall at the same interval it had spent 8 days learning, and Osk knew that sound and went cold, because the specimen was working the welds of cell 9, and this time it was not being still, because its human was on a dock with carbines pointed at her, and it had heard, the way it heard everything, that men had just been sent to end it. And the careful economy of 8 days was breaking. The tier alarm went a station-wide. Osk's cuff and serge slate and every panel on the dock lit red at once. Containment integrity, cell 9, seal degrading. The 2 Marines at the lift stopped. One of them keyed his own channel, and his voice came back over the party's open comm, tight, up an octave. Overseer, the tier, the subjects beating the cell, the seals reading amber. We can't. How do we dispose of it if we can't get the door to hold long enough to? Then vent it and fire through the vent. Salkesh's composure was gone. It is a hazard. It is behaving as a hazard. Dispose of it. You do that, Ren said, and it comes out. She had not moved. Carbines leveled at her chest. Alarms screaming. 60 keepers braced behind her and 8 Marines frozen between orders, and the small plane cadet stood alone in the center of the dock and spoke into the open comm channel that Osk, without a word, had just patched her into station-wide, so that her low, even voice went out over every panel and every Marine's ear and every camera at once. Listen to me, all of you, everybody on this dock and everybody up on that tier, listen. And they listened because it was the only comm sound in a station full of alarms, and a comm sound in a screaming room pulls every ear toward it. That cell has held for 8 days. You know why? Not the plate. It's been through the plate in its head since day 2. Your own curator logged it learning the welds. It hasn't come out because I asked it not to. That's the whole containment. That's the only containment there's ever been. Me, on the other side of the glass in a low voice every night asking it to stay. You take me off this station, or you make me watch you kill it, and there is nothing left holding it, and it comes through that wall, and then you don't have a hazard on a tier 3 decks up, Overseer. You have a loose 9th-generation Apex weapon on a station you locked the dock of. You sealed the buoys. Nobody's leaving, including it. She let that land in the screaming red silence. So here's where we actually are. The only thing keeping that animal in its cell is the comm of a cadet you're pointing 8 carbines at. You cannot seize the leash. The leash only works while I'm holding it and holding it willing. The second you drag me up that ramp, you're not taking my leash away from me. You're dropping it. The hammering came up through the deck, slow, deliberate, patient. A thing testing a wall it already knew it could break. And Wren turned her back on the carbines, turned her back on 8 leveled weapons on camera, and faced the nearest panel, and put her voice down into the low, going-nowhere register, and spoke past all of them to the thing 3 decks up. Hey, it's me. I know you can hear me, you can hear everything, that's the whole trouble with you. A breath of something almost like a laugh, warm in the low voice. I'm okay. Look, listen, I'm okay. Nobody's touched me. The lights are red and it's loud and I know exactly what that sounds like. It sounds like the box and the bad ship and every hand that was ever raised, and I know. But I'm right here and I'm not hurt, and I need you to stop hitting the wall. Not because you can't get through it. We both know you can get through it. I need you to stop because if you come through it right now with all these frightened men and all these guns, somebody's going to do something stupid, and I can't keep you safe from stupid once you're in the open. So stay, please be still, one more time for me. Her voice never rose. Easy, easy little monster, I've got you. Stop the wall now, stop it. The hammering slowed. Every soul on the dock heard it slow, the deliberate strikes stretching further apart, and further, the deck plates ringing less and less. And then, over the open channel, faint and impossible, the subsonic purr, rolling down through 3 decks of steel, and the containment panel ticked from amber back toward green, seal stabilizing, and the menagerie's ragged tide eased, cell by cell, back down into that low measured chorus. A dozen monsters going quiet because the one they waited for in the dark had told them, through the walls, that it was all right. The 2 Marines at the lift did not go up. They came back down slowly and took their place in the party and would not meet the overseer's eyes, because they had just heard, along with the whole station, exactly what they had been ordered to break. And the 8 carbines pointed at Wren Halloran's back wavered and lowered one after another, because there is a thing that happens even to hard soldiers when they understand that the small, unarmed person they have been ordered to seize is the only reason they are not about to die. And it is not mercy, and it is not disobedience. It is the plain animal arithmetic that the whole rest of the station had done days ago, and they had only now been made to do. You do not drop the leash. Not on a beast like that. Not for a man like this. Marines, said Salkesh, and his voice cracked on it, I gave you an order. None of them moved. They will not carry it, Osk said, because you have made it a thing no soldier will carry. And now, Overseer, I am going to tell you the part you have not worked out yet, because you have spent this whole day certain you were playing for the year while I played for the hour, and you had it precisely backward. Salkesh turned on him, and the crest that had been lacquered white and proud all day had gone dull and disordered, and that was its own small victory, and Osk did not let himself enjoy it quite. When I broadcast the tier record station-wide an hour ago, Osk said, I did not do it for your board 3 sectors out. I know how long a board takes. I did it because Cordon 9 sits inside a border interdiction zone. It is a holding station, Overseer. It exists to hold contested cargo for the border authority whose zone this is, and a station-wide broadcast on the emergency band does not stay on the station. It relays to the zone picket, automatically. It is in the safety regulations you did not read because you have never in your life served on a station that someone else's authority hangs over. He let that begin to land. The Kestrel's warrant, border interdiction cutter, has been sitting one system out running a smuggling interdiction, the same interdiction sweep that intercepted your disposal shuttle and put that animal on my tier in the first place. She has had my curator's evidence for 50 minutes. She has had the tier record for an hour, and the moment you locked my dock clamps and buoyed my station, Osk's voice did not rise, it went the cold, flat way. You seized control of border interdiction infrastructure inside a border interdiction zone without border authority, which is not a weapons division matter and not a station matter. It is a direct jurisdictional violation against the authority whose cutter is now, by my reading of her last transponder, about 9 minutes out. The dock had gone very quiet under the alarms. You did not win the year, Overseer, Osk said. You spent the hour proving, on 40 cameras and an open border relay, that a fourth circle of weapons division falsely declared a hazard, ordered the disposal of interdiction evidence, locked a border station's dock without authority, and commanded his Marines to abduct an unarmed cadet who was, at that moment, the only thing preventing a containment breach. You did not need a year to be unmade. You needed about 40 more seconds, and you have just spent them telling your Marines to do it anyway, on the record, to a border cutter's face. He stepped back. You are a man who arranges for his enemy to have already lost before he arrives. I have never had your gift for it, so I did the only thing a plainer man can do. I let you arrange your own. The comm on the dock lit, not the station channel, not the division channel, a third band, hard and formal, and a voice came over it that Osk had never heard and was very glad to hear. Cordon 9, sundering oath. This is Interdiction Cutter Kestrel's warrant, border authority in your zone. The voice was clipped and bored and absolutely certain, the voice of an authority that does not have to raise itself. Sundering oath, you are ordered to release Cordon 9's dock clamps and outer buoys immediately. You have seized border infrastructure without authority. Your biohazard declaration is suspended pending review. A border officer holds jurisdiction over prohibited forged material, and you do not. Stand down your boarding party and return to your vessel. Overseer Salkesh, you will remain docked and confined to the sundering oath under border custody pending inquiry into the events on Cordon 9 this cycle, all of which we have received. You have 4 minutes to comply before we treat the oath as a hostile vessel holding a border station. Kestrel's warrant out. Nobody on the dock moved for a moment. Then the Marines began, quietly, to shoulder their carbines and step back toward the umbilical, and they did it without waiting for Salkesh. And that, more than the border voice, more than the alarms, more than anything, was the moment Osk watched the Overseer understand that it was over. His own soldiers had stopped waiting for his orders. They were following the border officers, because the border officers were lawful and his were not. And a soldier can carry a great many hard things, but he cannot carry a charge sheet for a man his own fleet is about to disown. Curator, Osk said, release the dock clamps for the border cutter, not for the oath. Let the Kestrel's warrant dock. Leave the oath's clamps exactly where the Overseer set them, so that when the border officer comes down that umbilical, the first thing on record is that this station is still, at this moment, locked shut by a weapons cutter over nothing. He turned, finally, to Salkesh, and he gave the man the courtesy no one had given him all day, which was to speak to him quietly, so that the cameras caught the words but not the shame. Go back to your cutter, Overseer. Confine yourself, the way the border told you. It is the last order you will get to obey as an officer, and I would take it, if I were you. It is a cleaner ending than the one you came here to write for a small animal and a smaller girl. Dragon Salkesh, fourth circle of a family that does not lose, looked at the line of 60 unarmed keepers who had not moved, and at his own Marines withdrawing without him, and at the plain provisional cadet who had turned her back on his carbines to talk a monster off a wall 3 decks up. And he found, at last, that he had nothing to say, because there was nothing left to say that would not become, forever after, the thing he had said on the dock at Cordon 9. He went back up the umbilical alone. And Ren Halloran, in the center of the dock, in the fading red of the alarms, let out a breath that Osk suspected she had been holding since the cell door first opened 8 days ago, and swayed once on her feet and caught herself, and did not fall, because she had learned a long time before Cordon 9 that you do not fall in front of the people who came to take you. She fixed her cap. She turned to the commander and the warden and said, in a voice that was almost steady, "Sirs, permission to go back up to the tier. It stopped hitting the wall because I asked it to, and it's going to want to see that I'm all right with its own eyes, or it's not going to believe me, and it's had a very bad day." A pause, and the ghost of the buried smile. "We both have." They let her go up to the tier, and Osk went with her, because he found he did not want to be anywhere else, and because a warden of the second circle had learned something on his own dock about the value of standing where he chose to stand. The high containment tier had come back to its cold blue quiet. The menagerie had settled. Here and there a great sealed shape shifted behind a pane as they passed, and Osk noticed for the first time, because he had never had reason to notice, how each one turned toward the sound of the cadet's boots, the razorback in 6, the pale coiled thing in 11, all of them tracking her down the ring the way plants track a small distant sun. He had run this tier for 9 years and had thought of it as 300 dangers held apart from the settled worlds. He understood now that for 6 weeks it had also been, without his knowledge, a congregation, and that the small provisional walking ahead of him was the reason any of them slept. She stopped at cell 9, and she did not key the audio channel, and she did not speak. She simply sat down. She lowered herself onto the cold deck in her old spot, out of reach, not looking directly at the pane, exactly as she must have done that first night 3 weeks ago, and she let out a breath, and she waited. And after a moment the specimen, which had been standing at the far wall of its cell with its flanks running slow dark bands, crossed to the pane in its wrong hindquarters, first way and lay down against the glass in its own spot, brow to the pane, gold eyes on her, and the two of them sat there on either side of 40 centimeters of rated plate, not touching, not speaking, the human and the impossible animal breathing. And the subsonic purr came up soft and rolled through the deck and into the soles of Osk's boots, and he understood that he was watching the thing itself, the whole of it, the entire mystery the division had spent 9 generations and a fortune failing to build. A predator and a person, choosing in the quiet to be still together. "I'm all right," Wren said to it at last low. "See, all right, I told you I'd be right here." The animal closed its eyes. Osk left them there. There are things a warden does not need to witness to know are true, and there are moments that belong to 2 creatures and no third, and he had intruded on enough of the day's cruelty. He would not intrude on its one mercy. He went back down to meet the border officer, and to begin the long, unglamorous work of making sure the day could never be quietly rewritten. The border officer off the Kestrel's warrant was a lean, weathered Drayani of no circle at all. Border service took its people from everywhere and gave them rank instead of blood, which was exactly why the circles feared it. And she went through the station's records and Surd's evidence, and the tier feed with the flat, unhurried thoroughness of someone who had unmade larger men than Salkesh before lunch. "Prohibited forged material," she said, when she had read Surd's compilation. "9th generation product of an illegal apex weapon program. That is not fauna, curator, and it is not a hazard, and it is very much not the weapons division's to dispose of. It is evidence in a trafficking matter that falls under my authority, and evidence is preserved, not shot." She looked up. "The overseer's biohazard declaration is void. His writ of appropriation is void because you cannot appropriate what is not fauna. His seizure of your dock was unlawful, and his order to abduct a station cadet." She turned a page. "I have the tier feed and the dock feed and the open channel. I have all of it. He will not be an overseer by the end of the season. His family will spend a great deal of its considerable weight keeping him out of a border holding cell, and they may even succeed, and that is the most his blood will buy him, and he will know it every day for the rest of his service, which will be spent somewhere cold and small and far from any circle." She set the slate down. "You did a careful thing, warden, baiting him onto the record inside my zone. Most station wardens would have simply lost. Most station wardens do not have a curator who works without sleep and a cadet who will turn her back on 8 carbines," Osk said. "I only stood where they made it possible to stand." "Modesty is a circle affectation," the border officer said, not unkindly. Border Service beat it out of me years ago. Take the credit. You will need it because you have a decision coming that no one above you wants to make, and it is going to land on you." She nodded at the tear feed still frozen on her slate, the small human and the impossible animal on either side of the pane. The specimen is evidence. It cannot be released, and it cannot be destroyed, and it cannot be shipped to a weapons vault. It has to be held, alive, intact, for the duration of a trafficking inquiry that will take years. And your own record proves that the only thing on this station capable of holding it, the only thing in known space, as far as I can tell, is that girl and her voice. She let it sit. So, the Border Authority requires Cordon 9 to preserve this evidence. Cordon 9 cannot preserve it without the Cadet. The Weapons Division no longer has any claim on the Cadet because the moment the declaration voided, so did their pretext for calling her a fleet asset. Which means, Warden, that the question of what becomes of Cadet Halloran is no longer a division question, or a fleet question, or a question for any circle. It is a station question. It is your question. She almost smiled. Congratulations. You have won her the right to belong to you, and now you have to decide what that means. I would decide it well. I have read her file. She has been handed off and passed along and reassigned her entire short life, and she has never once on any of those transfers been asked what she wanted. You might try being the first. Osk found the Cadet where he had left her, on the cold deck outside Cell 9, and he lowered himself down beside her, which cost his old shin something, and which he did anyway. And for a while he did not say anything at all, because he had watched her do the same for the animal, and he was beginning to understand that the low, even voice was not the only thing she had learned. She had also learned the value of the silence you sit in before you speak, the one that tells a wary creature you are in no hurry to take anything from it. "The overseer is finished," he said at last. "The declaration is void. No one is going to take the animal, and no one is going to take you. The division has no claim." He watched the specimen's gold eyes track the small movements of her hands. "The Border Authority requires the station to hold the specimen as evidence for years, and the station cannot hold it without you. Which means, Cadet, that for the first time in your file, no one is deciding what happens to you. I am supposed to decide, and I find I would rather not." He turned to look at her. "So I am going to do a thing that was suggested to me by a border officer with no circle and no patience, and I am going to ask you, what do you want?" Ren Halloran was quiet for a long moment. The purr rolled softly through the deck. "Nobody's asked me that," she said. "She was right, whoever told you to. I don't have a good answer ready because I never got to have one." She turned her hands over. "I know what I don't want. I don't want to be an asset. I don't want to be studied. I don't want anybody to figure out how I do it, because there's nothing to figure out, and the trying will ruin it. The second you turn the low word into a method and a manual and a training pipeline, it stops being the thing that works and starts being another handler protocol, and it'll fail, and then somebody'll decide the animals are the problem instead of the protocol, and we'll be right back at the box." She looked at him. "And I don't want to leave. That's the part I do know. I've been reassigned 11 times, Warden. I counted. 11 postings before this one, and I never once minded leaving because there was never anything at any of them that would notice I was gone." She put her palm flat against the pane, and behind the glass the great head shifted to press its brow to the other side of her hand. "This one would notice. This is the first place I've ever been where something would notice." Her voice stayed level, but it cost her, and Osk pretended not to see the cost, which was its own kindness. "So I guess what I want is to stay, and keep doing the rounds, and be the one who talks to the things everybody else is afraid of, because it turns out I'm good at it, and it turns out it matters, and nobody's ever been able to say both of those about me at the same time before." Osk was quiet. "That is not a posting that exists," he said finally. "I know. It is going to have to exist," Osk said. "The station requires it, the Border Authority requires it, and I require it. because I have run this tier for 9 years believing I was its warden, and I discovered today that I was only its jailer, and that its actual warden has been a provisional cadet doing an unpaid night rotation nobody else wanted. He got his old shin under him and stood, and looked down the long cold ring of the tier, at the 300 sealed dangers that had, all day, turned toward the sound of her. Surd will not classify the specimen. She told me an hour ago, she said she can prove what it is, a 9th-generation forged product, and she can prove where it came from, but she will not write a species on it because it does not have one, because it is the only one of itself that ever chose, and a thing that chooses is not a specimen, it is a someone, and she will not file a someone as fauna. He almost smiled. So it will stay uncatalogued. The one thing on this station without a name in the manifest, except that it does have a name. You gave it one. And I am going to enter that name into the record, Cadet, over the objections of every classification protocol the Circle's own, because I have decided that this station will call things what they are. He keyed his cuff, and he entered it, and it went into the permanent record of Cordon 9, in the manifest column that had held unknown struck out 4 times. Not a species, not a designation, but the name a human girl had given a monster in the dark. And beside it, in the handler of record field that had been empty for 8 days because no handler had dared to fill it, he entered hers. The doctrine came later, and it came, as the best doctrine does, from the crew, not from command. It started with Sergeant Osler, who ran the night rotation, and who had signed Wren's boring sweep for 6 weeks without knowing what she did on it. 2 days after the sundering oath undocked in disgrace, the overseer confined aboard it, the family's weight already spending itself in distant offices to keep him out of a boarder cell. Osler came to Osk with a rotation sheet and a problem. The night sweep, warden, high containment outer ring. We've always rotated it, everyone takes a turn, it's a boring watch. But since all of it, the tier's different on the nights the cadet doesn't walk it. The animals are restless. Seal integrity's fine, nothing's wrong, but they're restless, and the ones on the far end don't settle till near dawn. And on the nights she does walk it, they're quiet by second bell. He turned the sheet in his hands, embarrassed, a hard old soldier bringing his warden a thing he had no protocol for. The crews started asking for her rotation by name, and they've started calling it something. I don't know that you'll like it. It's not regulation. Tell me. They call it the low word, Osler said. The round she does. Because that's what she does. She doesn't handle them. She doesn't feed them special. She just walks the ring slow and talks to them low, every cell, one after another all night. The crew watched the dock feed, everybody has by now, and they heard her talk that thing off the wall with 3 decks between them, and, well. Now when the tier's tense and the seals are amber and nobody knows what to do, somebody says get the cadet, she'll give it the low word, and it's warden, it's not a joke, that's the thing. They mean it. It's become the thing you do when the plate isn't enough. You send for the low word. He straightened. I'd like to put it on the rotation sheet as a standing assignment. The low word. Night rounds, high containment, Cadet Halloran, indefinite, if you'll sign it. Osk looked at the sheet for a long time. Give me the pen, he said, and change one thing. It does not say cadet. He signed it, and above her name he wrote the post that had not existed that morning and existed now, because a station full of proud predators had decided, without being ordered to, that it should. It says warden, 3rd circle equivalent, station grade by my authority as 2nd. Warden Halloran, keeper of the low word. He handed the sheet back. And Sergeant, the next time the tier goes amber and someone says get the cadet, you send for the warden. She earned the walk up from cadet. Let the record carry it. The Drayani did not take easily to the idea that a human held a post their own most feared predators recognized, and they did not. That was the thing Osk had to manage in the weeks after, and it was harder than managing the overseer had been. Because it was not one arrogant man but an entire species' quiet certainty about its own place in the order of things. The Drayani had spent a long history believing themselves the galaxy's finest predators. It was in their circles, their harnesses, their bleached crests, the whole architecture of their pride. And now the record of Cordon 9 said, in language no circle could edit, that a plain human girl walked a tier full of apex creatures, and every one of them turned toward her like she was the sun. And that when a 9-generation weapon bred to obey a wielder finally chose one, it had not chosen a Drayani. It had chosen her. There were officers who came to the station to disprove it. Osk let them. It was, he found, the fastest cure. A second circle from the Classification Bureau came, certain that the low word was a trick, a trained cue, a thing any competent handler could replicate. And he stood at the pane of cell 9 and spoke into the audio channel in the low, even register he had watched on the feed, word for word. And the specimen lifted its head and looked at him with flat gold disinterest, and then went back to watching the empty deck for the only voice it was waiting for, and the second circle went away quiet. A war handler came, decorated, who had walked down war alphas on 4 worlds, and he made it 3 cells down the tier before the Razorback in 6 rows against its pane, and showed him what it thought of a stranger walking the ring, and he left the tier faster than his dignity liked. One after another, they came to prove that there was nothing special about the human, and one after another, the animals themselves refused to let them, and the record of each failure went into the file beside the record of her success, until even the Classification Bureau stopped sending people, because every officer they sent came back having proven the opposite of what they were sent to prove. They keep thinking it's a technique, Surge said to Osk one night, watching the tier feed Ren 3 cells down, sitting on the deck, talking low to the pale coiled thing in 11 that had killed everything else that ever came near it. A method she could teach. They cannot make themselves believe the truth because the truth is worse for them than a trick they could learn. The truth they cannot have. She was quiet a moment. The animals do not obey her, Warden. I have watched hours of this. They are not obeying. Obedience is what the Forge tried to build and failed. What they do is, she searched for it, they defer. The way a young predator defers to an old one. The way the pack defers to the one who could take any of them and chooses not to. They are not answering a command. They are answering a rank. They have all, every one of them, independently, decided that the small, unarmed human is above them in the order of dangerous things, and they have decided it on instinct, at the level the Forge could never reach, and it is the most humbling thing I have catalogued in 30 years. She looked at Osk. The circles built their whole pride on being the apex. And a girl who has never won a fight in her life walked onto a holding station, and every apex we could cage took one look at her in the dark and stood down. They are never going to forgive her for it, and they are never going to be able to make the animals take it back. Osk thought about that for a long time. She did not win a fight, he said. That is the part they cannot fit into a circle. They keep looking for the strength in her, the dominance, the thing that makes an apex, and it is not there, because that is not what the animals are deferring to. He watched the small figure on the feed, the low voice they could not hear, the great pale killer in 11 laying its head down. They are deferring to the one who did not reach. Every one of those creatures has spent its life being reached for, netted, goaded, crated, wielded, and she is the first thing that ever came to the glass wanting nothing from them but their quiet. That is the rank they answer, not the strongest predator on the tier, the only one that was safe. He shook his head slowly. The circles will never understand it, Curator, because you cannot get there by being the finest hunter. You can only get there by having been prey and having decided anyway to be gentle. There is no forge for that. There is no protocol. There is only her. The lethal pole did not sleep. Osk was careful never to let anyone forget it, least of all himself, because a station that mistook the low word for softness would be a station that got someone killed. It reminded them once, hard, on a resupply cycle 2 months in. A freight hand off a supply hauler, new to the station, ignorant of everything that had happened, got into a dispute with Wren over a manifest on the receiving deck, a small stupid thing, a delayed shipment, a short temper. and in the heat of it he grabbed the front of her uniform and shoved her back into a stanchion hard enough to snap her head against the steel. He never got to do anything else. Osk was not there. He pieced it together after, from the deck feed and the sound. The receiving deck was 2 levels below high containment and separated by sealed bulkheads, and it did not matter. The instant the freight hand's hand closed on her, 3 decks of caged predators came off the deck at once, every pane on the high tier ringing, the Razorback and the Pale Thing and a dozen others slamming rated plate in a single synchronized roar that dropped the station's containment board to solid red and put every alarm on cordon 9 into the air. And in cell 9, the specimen hit the seam it had spent 8 days learning with the full weight of a body that had grown, in 2 months, half again as large as the thing that arrived, and the weld gave, and the door began to peel, and a 9th-generation Apex weapon started coming through the wall of its cell toward the deck where someone had put hands on the one it had chosen. And Ren Halloran, with blood coming down the side of her face from the stanchion, stood the freight hand off with one raised palm, not to strike him, to stop him, to keep him still and stupid, and where she could see him. And she keyed the station wide with her other hand, and she gave the whole screaming station the low word. Stop, not gentle now, flat and enormous and absolute, the word going out over every panel on every deck. All of you, stop, I'm all right. Nobody comes through a wall, nobody. You hear me, it's over, it's already over, look, I'm right here, I'm all right. And if you come through that plate right now, you make it worse. You make it so they can say I'm a danger, you make it so they take you away, and I am not losing you. So stop, stand down. Every one of you, now. And then lower the buried warmth coming back into the terrible flatness to the one she knew was already half through the wall. Easy, easy little monster, I've got you, down, it's finished. Come back to me, it's finished. The board came off, read 1 cell at a time. The specimen stopped with the door half peeled and its head and one great wrong-jointed shoulder already through the gap, and it held there, straining, the bruise colors racing down its flanks. And she talked it the rest of the way down over 3 minutes that felt like 3 years to the crew watching the feed, and it drew itself slowly back into the ruin of its cell, and lay down, and made the subsonic sound, and the tier went quiet, and the freight hand, who had understood, somewhere in the middle of it, exactly how close he had come, and exactly what had chosen not to happen to him, sat down hard on the receiving deck and was sick. Osk had the cell rebuilt with better plate and did not discipline the animals, because you do not discipline a pack for what its nature is, and had the freight hand's hauler company notified that the man was barred from cordon 9 for life, and entered the whole event into the record with a single line at the bottom that he thought the border officer would appreciate. Containment held. The warden gave the low word. The freight hand incident changed the crew, and it changed them in a direction Osk had not expected. He had braced for fear. He had thought, watching the deck feed of 3 decks of predators coming off the plate over one shove, that his people would draw further back from the tier and its keeper both, that they would start to look at the small human the way they looked at the animals, as a danger to be managed at a distance. He had misjudged them, the way he had misjudged nearly everything about the year. What the crew took from the incident was not that Ren was dangerous. It was that she was theirs, and that a stranger had put a hand on her, and that the whole station had come apart in her defense in the space of a breath. And something in that made a hard, tired containment crew, who had spent their careers keeping frightened things apart, decide quietly that they would keep this one close. It showed in small ways. The mess crew started keeping back the good ration paste for her night rounds, without being asked, and pretended they hadn't when she thanked them. The maintenance techs finally ran proper camera lines above the door height on the high tier, over budget, on their own time, and told Osk it was for containment integrity, which was a lie, and the truth was that they had all seen the dock feed, and none of them ever again wanted the record to depend on her word against a man with a circle. And Sergeant Osler, the hard old soldier who had signed her boring sweep for 6 weeks without knowing what it was, took to walking the first quarter of the ring with her at the start of each rotation. Not to guard her, he was clear about that. She needed no guarding on that tier. It was the safest place in 3 sectors for exactly one person. But because, he said gruffly, when Osk asked, a warden should not have to start her watch alone. And the animals did not mind him if he kept his hands down and let her do the talking. They've adopted her, Serd observed, watching Osler's gray head disappear up the ring beside the small uniformed figure. Your crew, the way the animals did. I've been trying to decide why, and I think it is the same reason in the end. She turned her slate face down, which on her meant she was about to say a true thing. She does not want anything from them either. That is the whole of it. In 30 years I have watched people bind to their commanders out of fear, and to their comrades out of need, and to their causes out of pride. I have never watched a station bind to someone out of nothing but the fact that she is safe to be near. There is no protocol for that. There is no rank for it, though you invented one. She looked at Osk. She has been passed hand to hand her whole short life, you told me. 11 postings. And now a station full of the hardest people I know have decided quietly, without a single order, that she is not going anywhere ever again, because they cannot stand the thought of being the 12th place that let her go. Serd's gray eyes were very steady. You did not save the animal from the overseer, Warden. Not really. The animal was always going to be all right, because she was always going to stand between it and the world. What you saved, what all of you saved on that dock, with your line of unarmed keepers, was her. You gave a girl who had never belonged anywhere the first thing in her life that would not let go of her. That is the HFY the record will never quite manage to say, because it does not have a column for it. The humans did not win because the human was strong. The humans won because, this once, everyone around the small one decided she was worth standing in a line for, and the beasts had known that about her from the first night. It only took the rest of us a war to catch up. Osk did not answer her for a while. On the feed, the old sergeant and the young warden walked the ring, and the dangerous things behind the panes lowered their heads, and the tier went quiet in their wake. Then we caught up, he said at last. That is the most a proud species gets to say some days, that the frightened things and the gentle one were right about each other from the start, and that we were only slow, and that we stopped being slow before it was too late. He watched the 2 small figures reach the top of the ring. It is enough. It is more than the circles ever gave me. It is enough. By the turn of the season, the cub was not a cub. It happened the way large things happen, slowly and then all at once, and Osk found that he had stopped noticing until the day he stood at the mouth of the high containment tier and realized that the shape lying against the pane of the rebuilt cell 9 no longer fit the frame of its old cell in his memory. It had come to cordon 9 the size of a hunting hound. 4 months later it was the size of a draft beast, its oil-black hide gone dense and slabbed with muscle, the wrong-jointed forelimbs longer than a drayani was tall, and when it rose the whole cell seemed to bend around it, and the bruised colors that had once slid across its flanks now rolled like weather over a mountainside. Serd's projections said it was nowhere near finished growing. Serd's projections set a number for its eventual mass that Osk had made her repeat twice, and then had not entered into the general record, because he did not want the classification bureau reading it and rediscovering their nerve. It had never once, in 4 months, needed the cell. That was the thing Osk had come to understand, standing at the tier's mouth watching a creature that could have peeled the station open like a ration tin lie quietly against a pane it could break in a breath. The plate had never held it. The low word held it, and the low word was not a leash and not a training and not a technique. It was a relationship. Wren walked the ring every night and sat on the cold deck and talked to it about nothing in a going-nowhere voice, exactly as she had that first week, and the enormous thing pressed its brow to the glass, and was, for those hours, not a weapon and not evidence and not the last surviving failure of a forge that built monsters. It was hers. And that, a bond, freely given, that no fortune and no forge and no circle could manufacture, was the thing the whole galaxy would eventually understand it had been shown, when the record of Cordon 9 finally worked its way up through the border inquiry and out into the wider light. The inquiry finished in the spring. It found what everyone on the station had known since the first day, that Dragon Salkesh had falsely declared a hazard, unlawfully seized a border station, and ordered the abduction of a cadet and the destruction of interdiction evidence to salve a wound to his pride. His family's weight kept him out of a holding cell, exactly as the border officer had predicted. It could not keep him an overseer. He was stripped of the Fourth Circle's white and posted to a survey station on the cold rim of settled space, a place with no predators to fear him and no circles to admire him. And the last Osk heard of him was a single line in a bureau notice, his name without its rank, and Osk read it once and felt nothing, which he decided was the correct amount to feel about a man who had come to shoot a small animal and been unmade by the girl who loved it. And the inquiry found one thing more, which no one had expected, because it went beyond Salkesh and beyond the station and into the thing itself. The forge program that had built the specimen, 9 generations of an illegal effort to manufacture a controllable apex predator, was still running, somewhere, in the dark, and the record of Cordon 9 had become evidence in the hunt for it. And in that record, entered into the permanent proceedings of the Border Authority, read by officers and magistrates across 3 sectors, was the whole of it: the tier feed, the dock feed, the open channel, a small human turning her back on 8 carbines, a 9-generation weapon standing down on a girl's word, a station full of apex predators deferring in the dark to the one that did not reach. The forge had spent decades, and a fortune trying to build a beast that would bond to a wielder on command. And the evidence that finally exposed it was the proof, entered into law, that the thing they were trying to build could not be built at all, that a bond is not a mechanism, that loyalty is not a trait you can splice, that the only way to make an apex predator choose you is to be, in a universe full of things that reach, the one that doesn't. They tried to give Wren a commendation for it. A border magistrate came out to Cordon 9 in the spring with a citation and a medal and a short prepared speech about the human liaison detachment and the interests of the Border Authority, and there was to be a small ceremony on the receiving deck. And Osk watched Wren stand through the speech in her plain uniform with her cap straight and her hands loose, and the exact patient boredom of a cadet 3 hours into a watch. And he watched her accept the citation, because refusing it would have been more trouble than taking it, and he watched her not once look at the medal. "You do not want it," he said to her after on the tier. "I don't mind it," she said. "It's a nice thing to do." Came a long way. She turned the medal over in her fingers, and then she did a thing that Osk entered into no record but never forgot. She reached through the feeding port of Cell 9 and set the medal down on the deck inside, and the enormous animal lowered its head and sniffed it and then lay down with its chin beside it, unbothered the way it lay beside anything of hers. "There," she said. "It can have it. It did the actual standing down. All I did was ask." She looked at Osk with the buried smile. "They keep wanting to give the medal to me, Warden. They've got it backwards, same as always. The brave thing on that dock wasn't me talking. It was a creature that's been hurt its whole life choosing, with 8 guns on the one it loved, to trust me one more time and not come through the wall. That's the courage. I just gave it something to trust. Pin the medal on that if you can find a chest big enough." The station changed around her, the way a den changes around the thing that keeps it. The plate stayed. Cordon 9 was still a holding station, and there were dangers on it that no low word would ever reach, cold alien things with no place in them for a voice. And those Osk kept behind rated seals the old way, because a warden who mistakes every monster for a wounded one is a warden who dies of the exception. But for the rest, for the frightened ones, the used ones, the ones whose danger was grief-wearing teeth, the station learned a new first move. The old first move had been the plate: contain it, seal it, keep it apart until command decided its fate. The new first move, on the nights it mattered, was 3 words on the rotation board and a runner sent down the tiers. And Osk never stopped feeling the strangeness of it, that a holding station built to keep dangerous things apart had discovered that the deepest containment it owned was a small human sitting down out of reach and refusing to be afraid. A new intake came in the summer that proved it. Came off a derelict hauler that the Kestrels warrant flagged and boarded, a thing in a cargo cage, insectoid and chitinous and wrong, all articulated dark plates and too many legs, and a sound it made that set Drayani teeth on edge from 3 cells away, and it had opened 2 of the boarding crew before they got it sealed, and it came onto Osk's tier trailing a reputation and a body count and a fresh biohazard flag that, this time, was entirely true. The crew that offloaded it were pale and shaking. The old Osk would have sealed it behind the best plate on the station and posted a double watch and waited for command to decide whether to keep it or space it. The new Osk sent for the warden. Wren came up in the middle of her sleep cycle in a station undershirt with her hair down, and she looked at the chittering horror behind the new plate for a while, and she did not do anything at first, the way she never did anything at first. Then she sat down on the cold deck across from it, out of reach, not looking at it directly, and she started talking. About nothing. About the bad summer ration paste, and the way the station groaned when it turned, and the derelict it had come off of, and how frightening a cargo cage is when you do not know if the next thing that opens it means to hurt you. A low, even, going nowhere voice, in a corridor full of Drayani who could not stand to be within 3 cells of the sound the thing made. And the thing made the sound and made it, and somewhere in the 3rd hour of the first night, it made it a little less. "It'll take a while, this one," she said to Osk at dawn, getting stiffly off the deck. "It's been hurt worse than the others, and it's got no face I can read, so I'm working blind. Weeks, maybe. Maybe it never comes all the way around, some of them don't, and I won't lie to it or to you about which." She rubbed the cold out of her hands. "But it stopped throwing itself at the plate around second bell. That's the first brick. You lay enough first bricks some nights, you get a wall that holds without anybody having to be afraid of it." She looked at the chittering dark shape, and there was no fear in her at all, only the flat patient attention Osk had first seen on a board provisional 3 hours into a watch. "Everybody sees a monster. I just see something waiting to find out if the next voice is another hand. Sooner or later one of them's got to not be a hand. Might as well be me. I've had the practice." And then there was the specimen, which was hers in a way none of the others would ever be, and which had, by late summer, earned the one privilege Osk had sworn on the first day he would never grant. He let it out. Not loose, never loose. The border evidence had to stay intact and the station had to stay safe, and Osk was not a fool. But under the warden's hand on the night rounds, with the tier sealed at both ends, he let cell 9 stand open and let the enormous animal walk the ring beside Wren while she gave the other cells the low word. He had argued himself out of it a dozen times and done it anyway, because Surd had shown him the containment board on the nights they tried it. Every other cell on the tier settling deeper, quieter, safer, with the great oil-black shape pacing slow at the human's shoulder, and because he had come to understand what he was actually looking at. He was looking at a lieutenant. The other beasts deferred to Wren. That had been true since the first night. But they deferred to the specimen too, now in a different key, not the way they answered her voice, but the way a pack settles when the biggest hunter in it walks the line and is calm. When the 2 of them made the rounds together, the small human and the mountain of muscle and grief that shadowed her, the tier went to a depth of quiet Osk had never achieved in 9 years with all the plate and protocol the circles owned. She walked the ring slow, talking low, and it walked at her shoulder, matching her pace exactly, its huge wrong-jointed stride broken down to human amble, its gold eyes moving over each cell as they passed, and the dangerous things behind the panes lowered their heads one after another, not to the plate, not to the guns, but to the 2 creatures walking the dark together. The one that did not reach, and the one that had finally, after 9 generations, found something worth not reaching for. "You have a formation, Warden," Surge said to him one night, watching the feed of the two of them coming up the ring with the whole tier gone still in their wake. "You understand that. It is small, and it is too, but that is what you are looking at. A human and an apex predator walking a line of the most dangerous creatures in 3 sectors, and the line falling quiet as they pass. If she wanted an army, ask, she has the beginning of one, and it would be the most terrible army the galaxy has ever seen, and the reason it will never be one is the only reason it could ever exist." She was quiet a moment. "She does not want an army. She wants them to sleep at night. That is the whole of it. The most dangerous force in known space, and its entire purpose is to help frightened things rest." She shook her gray head slowly. "Write that in a report and no circle would believe you. They are still looking for the weapon. They will never stop looking for the weapon. And it is right there on the feed, walking the ring at her shoulder, and it will never be a weapon because she never once picked it up." Osk asked her, near the end of the summer, to teach him the low word. He had not meant to. It was not a thing a warden of the second circle asked of a provisional cadet he had raised to station grade, and it was certainly not a thing a Dryani asked of a human, and he had carried the wanting of it for weeks before he let it out. But he had run this tier for 9 years afraid of the things behind its panes, and he had watched a small human unafraid among them for a season, and he had come to understand that his fear had never kept anyone safe. It had only kept him apart. And a warden who is apart from the things he keeps is, he had decided, only half a warden, and he did not want to retire as half of anything. "You can't learn it," Ren said when he asked. They were on the tier late, the ring sealed, the specimen lying against its open cell watching them both. "I keep telling the circle officers that and they keep not believing me. There's no word. The low word isn't words, Warden. It's the thing underneath the words. It's you having decided before you ever open your mouth that you're not going to reach. They can hear that. They can hear it under everything. You can't fake it, and you can't learn it, and you can't teach it, because it's not a skill. It's a decision you already made or you didn't." She looked at him and the buried smile came up. "But you're asking me to teach you, which means you already want to make it. So maybe you're closer than the circle officers ever were. They came to prove they could do it. You came to ask if you could learn. That's the whole difference right there. That's the whole thing." "Then tell me what to do." "Sit down," she said. "Out of reach. Don't look at it straight. And talk to it about something that doesn't matter in a voice that isn't trying to make anything happen. That's it. That's all I've ever done. The trick is that it isn't a trick." She stood up. "I'll be right here. It trusts me, so if I'm calm, it'll give you a little rope on my say-so, but the rest is you. It'll know in about a minute whether you've actually put your hands down or whether you're just holding them behind your back. So actually put them down." And she stepped back to the pane of the cell 3 doors along and gave that one the low word and left him. Osk sat down on the cold deck of his own tier, a warden of the second circle, out of reach of a thing he had feared for 8 months, and he did not look at it straight, and he talked to it. He talked about the tier, about the 9 years he had kept it and the pride he had taken in keeping it, and how that pride looked to him now in the light of a season, small and afraid and apart. He talked about the intake day and the handler's hand, and how he had red economy where he should have red manners. He talked in a low, even voice that was not trying to make anything happen, because he found, to his surprise, that he had nothing left he wanted to make happen. He only wanted, before the end of his watch, to sit in the dark near a thing he had been afraid of and not be afraid. It took 11 nights. On the 11th night the specimen rose from its cell and crossed the ring in that wrong hindquarters, first way, and Osk made himself stay still, made himself keep his voice low and his hands down and his eyes soft, exactly as she had shown him, and the enormous animal came to where he sat and lowered its huge oil-black head, and stopped, brow to brow, close enough that Osk felt the cold coming off its hide. and it looked at him with the flat gold eyes that had measured him on the first day and found him not worth the walk. And this time, slowly, it decided otherwise. It pressed its brow, very gently, against the crest of a Drayani warden, and it made the subsonic sound, low, and Osk Velen of the second circle put his plated hand against the plates of a 9th-generation Apex weapon that had opened a handler to the bone, and felt the deep engine of the purr roll up through his arm, and understood, at last and completely, the thing his whole proud species would never let itself learn. It was not a weapon. It had never been a weapon. It was a someone, and it had spent its whole manufactured life waiting for the galaxy to stop reaching for it, and a girl who had also spent her life being reached for had sat down in the dark and given it the one thing no forge could make and no circle could buy. And now, because she had vouched for him, it had chosen to give a little of that same trust to an old warden who had asked to learn how to stop being afraid. "There," Wren said quietly from 3 cells down where she had watched the whole of it. "That's the low word. You had it the whole time, warden. You just had to put your hands down." Osk did not trust his voice for a moment. When he had it, he said only, "Thank you," and the specimen huffed against his crest as if it agreed, and went back to its cell and lay down, and the tier was quiet, and an old Drayani sat on the cold deck of the thing he kept and was, for the first time in 9 years, not apart from it. The new cadets arrived in the autumn, a fresh rotation of the human liaison detachment, and a handful of young Drayani fourth formers on their first station posting, and Osk watched them come off the shuttle with the particular arrogance of the young and the trained, and he did not warn them about the tier, because there are things a person has to be shown. He gave them the night rounds on their 3rd evening. High containment outer ring, the boring watch, the rotation nobody wanted, the same sweep aboard provisional had walked a year and a half ago and changed the station on. He sent them up in a nervous cluster with a hand lamp and instructions to check that the doors that were still closed, and he went up quietly behind them, because he wanted to see their faces. They got halfway up the ring before they understood what they were walking into. The tier was awake. The great sealed shape stirred behind the panes as the young ones passed, the razorback rising in 6, the pale coiled thing lifting its head in 11, the insectoid horror that had come in the summer, not settled, that one, not yet, but no longer throwing itself at the plate, clicking softly in the dark, and the young cadets drew together tighter, and one of the Drayani fourth formers put a hand on the goad at his belt, and Osk watched them arrive, all at once. At the animal, understanding that they were small soft things in a corridor full of predators that were awake and aware, and unafraid of them. And then Wren came up the ring. She came the way she always came, unhurried in her plain uniform with the station-grade warden's tab now where the provisional's blue had been, her cap straight and her hands loose, and the enormous oil-black shape walked at her shoulder, out of its cell on the night rounds, its huge head level with hers, its wrong-jointed stride broken down to a human amble, its bruised dark flanks rolling slow. A mountain of muscle and grief and manufactured lethality, pacing the dark at the side of a small, ordinary woman, like the most patient hound that ever lived. And behind the panes, cell by cell, the most dangerous creatures in 3 sectors lowered their heads as the 2 of them passed, and the tier went to that depth of quiet Osk had never once achieved in 9 years of plate and protocol, and the young cadets stopped dead in the ring and stared, and their mouths came open, and the fourth former's hand fell off his goad, because there is no training in any circle that prepares a young predator for the sight of every apex it has ever been taught to fear bowing its head, in the dark, to a human who is not even looking at them. "Evening," Wren said to the frozen cadets, mild as she reached them. The specimen stopped when she stopped and turned its great gold eyes on the young ones, unhurried, measuring, the way it had measured Osk on the first day, deciding whether they were worth the walk, and every one of them went rigid. "Don't mind him. He won't bother you as long as you don't reach for me." A pause and the buried smile. "That's the only rule up here, really. Don't reach for the small ones. Everybody on this tier learned it the hard way once." You'll do better, you've been told. She crouched then easy and put her hand up, and the enormous head came down under it, and she scratched the plates of a skull that had once opened a handler to the bone, and the subsonic purr came up and rolled through the deck and into the boots of 6 terrified young cadets who would remember this night for the rest of their service. There, see, he's all right. He's just had a long life and he's careful and he's mine. She looked up at them, plain-faced and calm in the cold blue light, with a monster's head in her hands and a tear full of quieted death at her back. Go on and finish your sweep. Check the doors are closed. They are, I already know they are, but check them anyway. That's the job. And she stood, and she and the great dark shape walked on up the ring, and the young ones flattened themselves against the wall to let them pass, and made way without being told for a woman and the thing that loved her. Osk stayed on the tier after they had gone, the way he did most nights now, and he watched Warden Wren Halloran make the last of her rounds. He thought, sometimes, about the first day, about the thing hitting the inner wall hard enough to make the deck plates ring, and every Drayani in the room flinching at once, and the gold eyes measuring him and finding him not worth the walk. He thought about how the whole station had feared the strange cub in Cell 9, the unclassifiable thing, the maimer of handlers, the failure of a forge. The weapon of 4th Circle had crossed 3 sectors to shoot, and how not one of them, not the overseer with his writ, not the commander with his caution, not Osk himself with his 9 years of plate, had understood the one thing a board provisional had understood in a single night in the dark, that it was not a monster, that it was a someone, waiting for a voice that was not a hand. It reached the end of the ring beside her now, the enormous grown shape of the thing everyone had feared, and she stopped at the last cell and gave it the low word. And then she turned and crouched down on the cold deck one more time, out of long habit, in the spot where she had first sat 1.5 years ago with a ration flask and nothing but a going nowhere voice. And the great oil-black head came down and pushed against her chest, and she folded over it, and put her plain human hands flat against the plates, and Osk heard her say it, the same words she had said on the first day, when a station full of armed predators had frozen, and a 4th Circle overseer had gone white and asked what she was. There you are, said Wren Halloran low with the smile buried in it. Come here then. Come on, little monster, I've got you. And it went to her, the way it always went to her, past the plate and the protocol and the pride of a whole species that had spent its history certain it was the apex of the galaxy, the thing everyone feared, choosing in the quiet the one who did not reach. Osk Velen turned off the ring lights behind him as he left, and let them have the dark, and went down through the sleeping station he had finally learned to keep, and did not look back, because he no longer needed to. He knew what was there. A monster and the girl it loved, and the low word holding the whole cold edge of settled space together in a voice too quiet for the circles to ever hear.